The rain hammered against the cracked windshield of the 2007 Honda Accord with such force that Elena Martinez could barely see the abandoned industrial building through the gray curtain of water. She sat in the driver's seat, engine off to save the last quarter tank of gas, and stared at the structure that now legally belonged to her. A destroyed leather factory in Cleveland, Ohio, purchased 48 hours ago for $600, which was everything she had left in this world except for the $43 in her wallet that needed to feed her and her daughter for the rest of the week. The factory looked like something from a post-apocalyptic film. 3 stories of red brick, most of the windows shattered or boarded up. Part of the roof collapsed on the north side where fire had eaten through the supports 5 years ago. Graffiti covered the lower walls in layers of spray paint, each tag trying to claim ownership of a building that nobody wanted. The chain-link fence that once protected the property leaned at desperate angles, sections of it torn down or rusted through. Weeds grew through cracks in the parking lot, nature reclaiming what industry had abandoned. In the back seat, wrapped in every blanket and jacket they owned, 9-year-old Sophia slept fitfully. Her breath came raspy and wet, the cough that had started 3 days ago getting worse instead of better. Elena had been rationing the children's cough syrup, making the $8 bottle last as long as possible. But Sophia needed a doctor. Needed antibiotics, probably. Needed things that required money Elena didn't have and couldn't get. The auction had been accidental. Elena had been sitting in the Cleveland Public Library on a Wednesday afternoon. Sophia, doing homework at the table beside her, using the free Wi-Fi to search for jobs that never seemed to materialize. Her nursing license had lapsed 2 years ago when she couldn't afford the continuing education credits. Her resume showed too many gaps, too many short-term positions, too many explanations that made hiring managers' eyes glaze over with polite disinterest. She'd clicked on the wrong link, or maybe the right one, depending on how you looked at it, and ended up on a county surplus auction page. Properties seized for back taxes, abandoned buildings the city wanted off their books, parcels of land nobody wanted. Most of it was junk, lots in neighborhoods so rough that even drug dealers avoided them. Buildings so damaged that demolition costs exceeded any possible value. But one listing caught her eye. Former industrial property, 2.3 acres, Cleveland's industrial corridor. Main structure approximately 40,000 square feet. Significant fire damage. Condemned. As is, where is. No utilities. No guarantees. Starting bid, $500. The photos showed a brick fortress, solid despite the damage, with high windows that spoke of the kind of natural light factories had been built to capture before fluorescent bulbs made windows obsolete. The description mentioned the building had been a leather tanning and manufacturing facility from 1947 until 2018, when the owner died and the property fell into disrepair. The fire in 2019 had finished what neglect had started. Elena had stared at those photos for a long time, her mind working through possibilities she barely dared to consider. She'd been homeless for 7 months now, ever since her sister Carmen had kicked them out of the spare room where they'd been staying, claimed Elena was taking advantage, claimed she needed the space for her own family, claimed a lot of things that boiled down to not wanting the burden of her struggling sister anymore. 7 months of sleeping in the Accord, rotating between parking lots and side streets, trying to stay invisible. 7 months of gym memberships they couldn't afford just to have access to showers. 7 months of Sophia doing homework by dome light, eating dollar menu items for dinner, wearing the same 3 outfits to school until the other kids started to notice and the teasing began. The factory was shelter. Damage, yes. Dangerous, probably. But it was 4 walls and a roof, or parts of a roof anyway. It was space where Sophia could have more than the back seat of a 10-year-old car. It was property, real property, something that belonged to them that nobody could take away. Elena had watched the auction countdown that Wednesday evening. Sophia asleep in the library's reading corner, staff pretending not to notice because they were kind and understood more than they said. The bidding stayed at $500 for hours. Nobody wanted a destroyed factory in a dead industrial zone. Why would they? At 30 minutes before the auction closed, Elena placed a bid. $525. Her hand shook as she hit confirm. That was groceries for 2 weeks. That was a transmission fluid the Accord desperately needed. That was the margin between barely surviving and complete disaster. The counter ticked down. 20 minutes. 15. 10. Nobody else bid. The property was too damaged, too remote, too expensive to repair. Who would want it? At 5 minutes remaining, Elena increased her bid to $600. It felt insane, reckless, exactly the kind of decision people would point to later as proof she couldn't manage her own life. But the alternative was another winter in the car, another season of watching Sophia get sicker, another year of being invisible. When the auction closed at 9:47 p.m. on a rainy Wednesday in November, Elena Martinez owned an industrial property. The confirmation email arrived with instructions for payment and deed transfer. She had 72 hours to pay in full, or the sale would be voided. She'd pay the next morning at the county clerk's office, counting out $600 in 20s and 10s and 5s she'd been saving for months. Money meant for a security deposit on an apartment, if she could ever find a landlord willing to rent to someone with her history. The clerk, a tired woman in her 50s with kind eyes, processed the payment and handed her a receipt. "This the old Barrington leather place?" the woman asked, examining the property ID. "Yes, ma'am." The clerk's expression shifted to something between pity and concern. "You know it's been condemned, right? Fire took out a good chunk of it. City's been trying to decide whether to demolish it or not." "I know. I'm going to fix it up." The words sounded absurd coming out of her mouth. Fix it up with what money? With what skills? With what materials? But she kept her voice steady, her expression confident, the mask she'd learned to wear when people questioned her choices. The clerk printed the deed, stamped it with her official seal, slid it across the counter. "Well, good luck to you. That building's been sitting empty for 5 years. Maybe it's ready for someone to care about it again." Elena had called her family from the parking lot, sitting in the Accord with the deed in her hands, still trying to process that she owned property. Real property. 2.3 acres and 40,000 square feet of damaged brick and broken dreams, but hers nonetheless. Her sister Carmen answered on the 4th ring, voice already impatient. "What is it, Elena?" "I'm making dinner. I bought a building." Silence. Then laughter, sharp and disbelieving. "You bought a building?" "Elena, you're living in your car." "I bought at auction. An old factory. I'm going to fix it up, make it livable. Sophia and I will have a real home." More laughter, louder now. "Carlos, you got to hear this. Elena bought a factory." Her brother-in-law's voice in the background, muffled but mocking. Then Carmen again, all amusement gone. "Are you serious?" "Elena, please tell me this is it's not a joke. I spent $600 on it. It needs work, but $600? Elena, that's your emergency money. That's the money you were supposed to be saving for first and last month's rent on an apartment. And you spent it on what? Some condemned building." Elena's grip tightened on the phone. "It's property, Carmen. It's mine. Nobody can evict me from something I own." "Oh my God." Carmen's voice rose to that pitch it always hit when she was about to launch into one of her lectures. "You can't even afford to feed your daughter properly, and you're buying real estate? Do you hear yourself? Do you understand how insane this is? I understand I've been living in my car for 7 months while my family. Don't you dare make this about us not helping you enough. We let you stay here for 3 months, Elena. 3 months of you and Sophia taking up space, using our utilities, eating our food. We did our part. It's not our fault you can't get your life together." The words landed like punches, each one finding the vulnerable places Elena tried to keep protected. "I just thought you should know. I thought maybe you'd be happy for me." Carmen's laugh was bitter. "Happy? I'll be happy when you stop making terrible decisions and start acting like a responsible parent. That building is probably falling apart. It's probably dangerous. And you're gonna what? Live there with Sophia? In a condemned factory? Better than the car. Is it? At least in the car you're mobile. At least if something goes wrong, you can drive away. Now you've tied yourself to a worthless building that's going to cost you money you don't have to fix. This is exactly why you ended up homeless in the first place, Elena. You make impulsive decisions without thinking through the consequences." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to point out that the impulsive decision that led to homelessness was trusting her sister to pay back the $8,000 loan 2 years ago, money Elena had given her when Carmen's husband lost his job. Money Carmen swore she'd repay within 6 months. Money that never materialized, that disappeared into Carmen's life, while Elena's savings evaporated and her financial stability crumbled. But there was no point. Carmen had rewritten history in her own mind, turned herself into the generous sister burdened by Elena's problems rather than the debtor who'd betrayed her trust. "I have to go," Elena said quietly. "I need to figure out how to make this work." "Good luck with that." Carmen's voice dripped sarcasm. "Call me when you're ready to admit this was a mistake and actually ask for help fixing your life the right way." The line went dead. Elena sat in the parking lot of the county clerk's office and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes, a luxury she rarely allowed. Then she wiped her eyes, started the car, and drove to the library where Sophia waited to tell her daughter they were moving to a factory. Sophia's reaction had been different from Carmen's. She'd looked up from her homework, coughed into her sleeve, and smiled with the kind of hope children somehow maintain even when adults have long since given up. "A real building, Mama? With rooms and everything? It needs a lot of work, baby. Can I have my own room?" The question broke Elena's heart and filled it at the same time. "Maybe. We'll have to see what's safe first. But yes, eventually you can have your own room." Sophia had hugged her then, small arms fierce despite the fever Elena could feel through her daughter's shirt. "I can't wait to see it." That had been 3 days ago. Now Elena sat in the rain-soaked parking lot of the Barrington Leather Factory, looking at what her desperation had purchased. The building was worse than the photo suggested. The brick facade, which had appeared solid in the compressed digital images, showed massive cracks and water damage. The section where the roof had collapsed exposed interior beams blackened by fire. Plywood covered some windows, but most were just empty holes letting weather and wildlife inside. The property was surrounded by similar corpses of American industry. An automotive parts warehouse to the north, windows shattered, loading docks empty. A textile mill to the south, mostly demolished, only the shell of the main building still standing. Beyond that, vacant lots where factories had once stood, now just weedy fields with the occasional concrete foundation marking where prosperity had died. The rain lessened to a drizzle. Elena turned in her seat to check on Sophia, found her daughter awake, eyes glassy with fever. "Are we there, Mama?" "Yeah, baby. We're here." Sophia sat up slowly, looked out the window at the building. Her expression didn't change, didn't show fear or disappointment, just that careful neutrality children develop when they've learned not to expect much. "It's really big." "It is. Come on, let's go see what we've got." Elena had brought supplies in the trunk, purchased with the last of her money. 2 flashlights, batteries, a crowbar in case doors were locked or boarded, work gloves, a first aid kit because the building was almost certainly full of sharp edges and rusty metal. She pulled on her jacket, helped Sophia into hers, and they stepped out into the drizzle. The main entrance was on the east side, a double door of metal and glass that had once been secured but now hung at angles from broken hinges. Elena pushed through easily, the smell hitting her first. Mold and rot and smoke damage, layers of decay that spoke to years of neglect. The flashlight beam cut through darkness, revealing a reception area that had been stripped of anything valuable. Holes in the walls where copper wiring had been stolen. The desk torn apart, filing cabinets tipped over, papers scattered across a floor thick with debris. "Stay close to me," Elena said, taking Sophia's hand. "Watch where you step." They moved deeper into the building. The reception area opened into a main floor that stretched impossibly far back, probably 200 feet, with high ceilings supported by steel beams and thick wooden posts. This had been a manufacturing floor, Elena realized, where leather had been cut and stitched and transformed into products. Industrial sewing machines sat rusted in rows, abandoned mid-shift like the workers had simply walked away one day and never returned. Conveyor systems snaked overhead, motionless and coated in dust. The fire damage was concentrated on the far end. Black scorch marks climbed the walls like frozen flames. Part of the ceiling had indeed collapsed, opening the space to the gray sky above, rain dripping through to puddle on the concrete floor. But the majority of the building was intact. Damaged, yes. Filthy and abandoned, certainly. But structurally sound enough that Elena felt the first flutter of actual hope. "Look, Mama." Sophia pointed to a metal staircase leading to the second floor. "Can we go up?" Elena tested the stairs carefully, weight on each step before committing. The metal was solid, rust superficial rather than structural. They climbed to a mezzanine level that held offices, small rooms with frosted glass windows, most of the glass long since broken. Desks remained, along with ancient filing cabinets and the detritus of office life. Calendars from 2018, coffee cups growing mold, a jacket hanging on a coat, rack like someone might return for it. The second floor revealed something more promising. What looked like a break room with an actual kitchen area. Industrial sink, cabinets, space for a refrigerator that had been removed. The plumbing fixtures were corroded, but present. Elena turned a handle on the sink and heard water hammer through pipes, then a sputter, then nothing. The water had been shut off, obviously, but the infrastructure existed. The third floor was accessible via another staircase at the rear of the building. This level was smaller, maybe only a quarter of the building's footprint, with lower ceilings and rooms that felt more residential. Storage spaces, Elena guessed, or maybe administrative offices. One room had a bathroom, complete toilet and sink, and a shower stall tiled in pale green ceramic that had somehow survived decades of abandonment. The tiles were cracked, the grout black with mold, but the fixtures were there. Sophia coughed, a deep, wet sound that made Elena's chest tighten. They needed to get out of the dust and mold, needed fresh air and warmth and medicine. But first, Elena needed to understand what she'd bought, needed to assess whether this desperate gamble could possibly work. They returned to the main manufacturing floor. Elena swept her flashlight across the space methodically, taking inventory. The machines were worthless, too old and damaged to sell. The copper wiring had already been stripped by scavengers. But the building itself, the bones of it were solid. Brick and steel and concrete built when they built things to last. She found the electrical panel in a utility closet near the main entrance. The breakers were all switched off, but when she examined the system, she recognized the bones of professional installation. Three-phase power for the heavy machinery, separate circuits for lighting and climate control. If the power company hadn't disconnected the service completely, if the wiring hadn't been too damaged by the fire, there might be a chance. The heating system was another story. Industrial boilers that had burned oil or gas, fed by pipes that snaked through the entire building. One of the boilers showed fire damage, melted and warped beyond salvage. But the second one, tucked into a mechanical room on the north side, looked intact. Old, certainly probably decades past its expected lifespan, but intact. Elena stood in the mechanical room with Sophia pressed against her side, and she did the math that had kept her awake for 3 nights straight. She had $43. That was it. $43 between them and complete destitution. It wouldn't pay for utilities to be turned on. Wouldn't buy materials to board up windows. Wouldn't rent a generator or purchase fuel. Wouldn't do anything except maybe feed them for a few more days. But the building was theirs. Legal deed in her name, recorded with the county, real property owned free and clear. No mortgage, no rent, no landlord who could kick them out. Just Elena and Sophia and 40,000 square feet of damage possibility. "Mama, I'm tired." Sophia's voice was small, feverish. "Can we rest?" They found a corner on the second floor in one of the old offices, far from the fire damage, with walls that blocked the draft. Elena laid out their sleeping bags, the cheap ones from Walmart that were all she could afford, and made a nest of blankets and jackets. Sophia curled up immediately, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3, the one toy Elena had refused to sell no matter how desperate they got. Elena sat beside her daughter and ran her fingers through Sophia's dark hair, damp with fever sweat. They were in a condemned building with no power, no water, no heat. Winter was coming, real winter, the kind Cleveland did with brutal efficiency. She'd spent their last money. on a property that needed tens of thousands of dollars to make habitable. Carmen was right. This was insane. But they weren't in the car anymore. They had space, had walls, had potential. And Elena had survived worse than this. She'd survived an abusive marriage, had left with infant Sophia and $200 in her pocket. She'd survived nursing school while working 2 jobs. She'd survived 7 months of homelessness without losing her daughter to the social services system that circled like vultures around struggling single mothers. She could survive this too. Elena waited until Sophia's breathing evened into sleep, then pulled out the county deed and read it by flashlight for the 100th time. Elena Maria Martinez, sole owner of property located at 4751 Industrial Parkway, Cleveland, Ohio. Parcel 45-982-3301. 2.3 acres, including all structures and improvements. All structures and improvements. She let her flashlight play across the office, the desk with its broken drawers, the filing cabinet that had been pried open and emptied, the walls with their water stains and peeling paint. What improvements could possibly exist in a building this destroyed? But the deed was specific. Everything on the property belonged to her now. Every machine, every pipe, every brick. Whatever previous owner had left behind, whatever remained after 5 years of abandonment and scavenger raids, it was hers. Elena stood, leaving Sophia sleeping, and began to explore more systematically. She'd been focused on basics during the first pass: structure, utilities, safety. Now she looked for anything that might have value, anything she could sell to generate cash for the most basic repairs. The 3rd floor held more office spaces, these ones clearly administrative. Corner offices with views that would have been impressive when the industrial corridor thrived. Executive desks of heavy wood, some damaged but others merely dusty. Filing cabinets full of records from a business that no longer existed. On one wall, framed photographs showed the factory in its prime. Workers at sewing machines, huge rolls of leather being processed, finished products, jackets and bags and gloves, stacked in warehouses. One photograph was dated 1963, showed a ribbon-cutting ceremony. A man in his 30s, dark suit, confident smile, cutting a ceremonial ribbon while local officials applauded. The brass plate on the frame read, Harold Barrington, founder. Grand opening, Barrington Leather Manufacturing, June 12, 1963. Elena studied the photo. This man who'd built something from nothing, who'd employed hundreds of people for over 50 years, whose dream had ended up abandoned and condemned. She wondered if he'd known, at the ribbon cutting, that it would all eventually crumble. Or if he'd believed, like everyone believes, that what they build will last forever. She moved to the corner office that had clearly been Harold Barrington's. Larger than the others, with a massive desk of dark wood, leather chair cracked and moldy, built-in bookshelves that still held volumes on business management and manufacturing processes. A personal photograph sat face down on the desk. Elena picked it up, wiped away dust to reveal a family portrait. Harold, maybe in his 60s, gray-haired but still strong-looking. A woman beside him, elegant, smiling. 3 children, adults themselves, with families. Grandchildren scattered around them. Everyone smiling for the camera, frozen in a moment that predated the decline. Elena set the photo carefully on the desk and opened the drawers methodically. Most were empty, cleared out when the business closed. But the bottom drawer was locked, the kind of lock that was meant to be secure but had rusted over years. Elena used her crowbar, applying steady pressure until the lock mechanism gave way with a crack that echoed through the empty building. Inside were personal documents. Harold's passport, expired in 2015. Birth certificate, social security card, marriage license. A last will and testament executed in 2016 that left everything to his children equally. Business records showing the final years of Barrington Leather, the declining profits, the desperate attempts to modernize, the loans taken and never repaid, the slow collapse that ended with closure in 2018. At the bottom of the drawer, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it from moisture, was a leather journal. Elena opened it carefully, The pages brittle but readable. Harold's handwriting, neat and precise, filled every page. Dates spanning from 1963 to 2018, entries scattered throughout. Not daily, but periodic observations, thoughts, records of important moments. Elena flipped through pages, reading glimpses of a life. The excitement of the grand opening. The pride in landing major contracts. The stress of economic downturns. The joy of watching children grow up in a business he'd built. The sorrow when his wife died in 2009. The frustration as the industry changed and his factory couldn't compete with overseas manufacturing. One entry, dated January 3rd, 2016, caught her attention. 73 years old. The business is dying. I know it. The children know it, though they're too kind to say so outright. Foreign competition has made it impossible to compete. I could sell the equipment, liquidate inventory, close it all down gracefully. That's what my accountant advises. But this factory has been my life for 53 years. I built it from nothing. Employed 300 people at our peak. Put their children through college. Gave them pensions and pride and purpose. How do you let something like that just die? How do you accept that everything you built will eventually turn to dust? Elena read the words and felt an unexpected kinship with this man she'd never met. She understood building something against impossible odds. She understood fighting to preserve what mattered, even when logic said to let go. She kept reading, entries growing more sporadic as Harold aged and the business faltered. June 2017, we're down to 42 employees. Had to let 10 more go this week. Some of them have been with me for 30 years. The look in their eyes when I gave them the news, I'll carry that to my grave. But what choice do I have? We can't make payroll. Can't pay suppliers. Can't compete with factories in China producing the same goods for a tenth of our cost. The end is coming. I just don't know how to accept it. December 2017. Christmas party today. Used to be huge celebrations, hundreds of people, families invited, bonuses that actually meant something. Today it was 12 of us in the break room. Pizza, I paid for myself because the company account is empty. Everyone being brave, pretending this isn't the end. But we all know, next year there won't be a party. Next year there might not be a factory. March 2018, final day. We locked the doors this morning. 37 employees, every one of them there to the end. I shook each person's hand, thanked them for their service, gave them the severance I'd scraped together from selling my house. My children think I'm crazy, giving away what should be my retirement money. But these people gave me their lives. The least I can do is help them transition. The factory sits empty now. I can't bring myself to sell it. Can't bear the thought of it being torn down or converted into condominiums. So it sits, my monument to failure. My reminder that nothing lasts, no matter how hard you fight. The journal entries ended there. Elena checked the oilcloth wrapping and found a newspaper clipping, obituary section. Harold James Barrington, 75, died peacefully in his sleep on October 8, 2018, in Cleveland, Ohio. Beloved father to James, Margaret, and Susan. Devoted grandfather to 8. Preceded in death by his wife, Eleanor. Harold founded Barrington Leather Manufacturing in 1963 and operated it successfully for 55 years, employing generations of Cleveland families. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Cleveland Industrial Heritage Foundation. Elena sat back in the chair, journal in her hands, and felt the weight of history pressing down. Harold had died 3 weeks after closing his factory. The fire had happened a year later, probably vandals or homeless people seeking warmth. The property had fallen into tax delinquency when his estate couldn't sell it and eventually gave up trying. The county had seized it, tried to auction it repeatedly, failed, and finally listed it for minimum bid just to get it off their books. And now it belonged to Elena Martinez, single mother, homeless, broke, desperate. She wondered what Harold would think of that. Would he be disappointed that his life's work had fallen so far? Or would he understand that sometimes the broken find each other, that sometimes the desperate inherit what the successful abandon? Sophia's cough echoed from the office where she slept. Elena closed the journal carefully, wrapped it back in the oilcloth, returned it to the drawer. She would read more later. Right now, her daughter needed her. But as she stood to leave, her flashlight caught something odd. The back wall of Harold's office, behind where the desk sat, was brick like the rest of the building, except one section, maybe 6 feet wide and 8 feet tall, was slightly different. The bricks were the same size and color, but the mortar between them was newer, cleaner, less weathered than the surrounding wall. Elena approached and ran her hand across the surface. The bricks here were smooth, carefully maintained. She tapped the wall with her knuckles and heard a different sound. Not the solid thud of brick backed by more brick, but a hollow echo, like there was space behind it. She stood very still, her mechanic's mind working through possibilities. A sealed doorway, maybe storage space walled off for some reason. Or just a repair job, old bricks replaced with new ones after structural damage. Probably nothing. But Elena had learned to pay attention to things that seemed off, that didn't quite fit. In her years as a nurse, she'd caught problems others missed by noticing subtle inconsistencies. A patient coloring that was just slightly wrong. A vital sign that trended in an unexpected direction. The small things that pointed to bigger truths. This wall was slightly wrong. And in a building this old, this abandoned, anything slightly wrong deserved investigation. But not tonight. Tonight, Sophia needed rest and warmth and medicine Elena couldn't afford. Tonight, they needed to survive in a building with no utilities and winter pressing in from all sides. Elena returned to the office where Sophia slept. She crawled into the sleeping bag beside her daughter, wrapped them both in layers of blankets and jackets, and held Sophia close. The fever radiated through the child's small body, hot and concerning. Tomorrow, Elena would have to find a clinic, beg for antibiotics, promise payment she couldn't make. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to make this building livable. Tomorrow she'd have to prove Carmen wrong, prove she could do this, prove that sometimes desperate decisions were the only good decisions left. But for now, in the darkness of an abandoned factory that legally belonged to them, Elena let herself feel something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too fragile, too easily crushed. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. That this broken building could become home. That the wall in Harold's office with its hollow echo might mean something. Rain hammered the roof above them. Wind whistled through broken windows. The building groaned and settled around them like a living thing. And Elena held her daughter and waited for morning, for whatever came next. For the future, she was trying desperately to build from the wreckage of everything that had fallen apart. Sophia stirred, mumbled something in her sleep. Elena kissed her forehead, tasted fever and fear and the salt of a childhood being lived in spaces never met. "We're going to be okay, baby," she whispered into the darkness. "I promise." It was a promise she had no idea how to keep. But she made it anyway, because that's what mothers did. They promised impossible things and then fought like hell to make them real. The first week in the factory tested every assumption Elena had about survival. The temperature dropped into the 20s at night, frost forming on the inside of broken windows. Sophia's cough worsened until Elena spent an entire day sitting in the emergency room at Metro Health, waiting 6 hours to see a doctor who prescribed antibiotics and gave her a look that asked questions he legally wasn't allowed to voice. The prescription cost $47 at the pharmacy. Elena paid with her last $43 and the emergency $20 she kept hidden in her shoe. That left her with -$4 and a daughter who needed to eat. She swallowed her pride and went to St. Vincent Delaware Paul on Lorraine Avenue. The food pantry operated on Wednesdays and Fridays, and the volunteers didn't ask questions when she filled her bags with canned goods, pasta, rice, peanut butter. They just smiled with the kind of gentle understanding that made Elena want to cry and scream at the same time. "You take care now," an older woman said, helping her load the bags into the Accord. "Come back Friday if you need more." Elena drove back to the factory with groceries that would last maybe 2 weeks if she stretched them. Sophia was improving with the antibiotics, the cough loosening, the fever breaking. Small victories that felt enormous when you had nothing else. The building revealed itself slowly, like a puzzle Elena was learning to read. The main floor was too damaged, too exposed, too vast to heat or secure. But the second floor, specifically the old administrative offices, could work. Elena chose 3 adjoining rooms at the southeast corner, far from the fire damage. One would be their bedroom. One would be a living space. The third had the bathroom with the green-tiled shower. She spent her days making these spaces livable, swept out debris and dead leaves and evidence of animals that had sheltered here, scrubbed floors and walls with water she carried in buckets from a gas station 2 miles away, covered broken windows with plastic sheeting and duct tape, creating barriers against the wind, arranged their few possessions, the sleeping bags and the camping stove and the plastic totes that held their clothes, into something that resembled a home. At night, by the light of battery-powered lanterns she'd found in the clearance section of Dollar General, Elena read Harold's journal. Page by page, entry by entry, learning about the man who'd built this place and watching it crumble. Harold had been methodical, almost obsessive, about documenting his business. Every major decision, every significant contract, every financial challenge. The journal was part diary, part business record, part confession. He wrote about mistakes he'd made, opportunities he'd missed, regrets that accumulated like interest on debt. But he also wrote about pride, the satisfaction of creating something, of employing people, of building a business that mattered. Even in the later entries, when everything was falling apart, there was pride beneath the sorrow. Pride in having tried. Pride in having lasted as long as he did. Pride in having built something real, even if it couldn't last forever. One entry from 2015 stood out. I've been thinking about legacy, what we leave behind. My children will inherit money, property, investments. But what they won't inherit is the thing I'm most proud of, the knowledge that we built something that mattered. That 300 families had security because this factory existed. That we made quality products people valued. That we proved you could succeed in American manufacturing if you worked hard enough and cared enough. But times change. The world moves on. And sometimes the things you build become obsolete, not because you failed, but because success itself became defined differently. I don't know what will happen to this building after I'm gone. My children wanting to sell it, cash out, enjoy retirement. But I can't. It would feel like betrayal, like admitting it was all for nothing. So it sits, and I sit, and we wait together for whatever comes next. Elena closed the journal and looked around the office she was converting into a bedroom. She wondered if Harold would approve of what she was doing, taking his abandoned factory and turning it into a home, making something useful from his failure. Or would he see it as further proof that everything eventually becomes dust? On the 8th day, Elena found the first strange thing. She was in the basement, which she'd avoided until now, because basements in abandoned buildings were usually where the worst damage hid. But she needed to understand the building's bones, needed to know what systems existed and which ones were salvageable. The basement ran the full length of the main floor, a vast space with a low ceiling supported by thick columns. The boilers sat here, massive industrial units surrounded by a maze of pipes and valves, water heaters that could serve hundreds, electrical panels that fed power to every corner of the building. The mechanical heart of the factory, now cold and still. Elena walked slowly, flashlight cutting through darkness that felt absolute. The fire damage extended here, too, blackening walls and melting pipes in the northwest corner. But most of the space was intact, just abandoned. Shelves held supplies that had been left behind. Cleaning chemicals, maintenance tools, boxes of light bulbs and fuses, and spare parts for machines that no longer ran. At the far end of the basement, behind the boilers, Elena found a heavy door. Steel, not wood, with a substantial lock that looked different from the others she'd seen. This lock was newer, higher quality, the kind designed to actually stop people rather than just provide the appearance of security. The door was locked. Elena tried the crowbar, but this lock didn't give. She examined it carefully, her nurse's training in observation kicking in. The lock was a high-security model, deadbolt mechanism, probably installed within the last decade based on its condition. Everything else in the building showed age and neglect, but this lock looked maintained. Why would Harold Barrington install a high-security lock on a basement door in a dying factory? Elena filed the question away and continued exploring. She found the main water shutoff, confirmed that city water still reached the building even though the internal valves were closed. Found the gas line, also shut off, that had once fed the boilers. Found electrical conduits that traced up through the ceiling to every floor. The building's infrastructure was more intact than she dared hope. If she could get utilities turned on, if she could get past the basic issues of heat and power and water, the factory could actually function as a dwelling. Unconventional, certainly. Probably illegal, given the building's condemned status. But possible. Sophia was improving daily with the antibiotics. Her cough faded, the fever gone, energy returning. She explored the factory with the fearless curiosity of a child who'd learned to find adventure in difficult circumstances. She created obstacle courses through the manufacturing floor, jumping from machine to machine. She set up a school in one of the second-floor offices, lining up stuffed animals as students and teaching them from her homework. This is Max. She introduced Elena to a moth-eaten teddy bear she'd found in a corner. He's behind in math, but I'm helping him catch up. Elena watched her daughter teach imaginary students and felt her chest tighten. Sophia deserved better than this. Deserved a real school with real friends, a real home with heat and safety, a real childhood that didn't involve sleeping in abandoned factories and playing with found toys. But they were surviving. That was something. They had shelter, had food, had each other. It wasn't enough, not nearly, but it was more than they'd had 2 weeks ago. On the 11th day, Elena's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, Cleveland area code. She answered warily, expecting bill collectors or scammers. Elena Martinez? A woman's voice, professional but not unkind. Yes. This is Margaret Shun from the Cleveland Building Department. We need to schedule an inspection of the property at 4751 Industrial Parkway. Our records show you recently acquired the building through county auction. Elena's stomach dropped. An inspection? Standard procedure for condemned properties changing ownership. We need to verify current status, assess structural integrity, determine if the condemnation order should be lifted or if demolition is required. When would this inspection happen? Next Wednesday, November 29th, at 10 a.m. The inspector's name is Robert Walsh. He'll need access to all areas of the building. Elena did the math. That was 4 days away. 4 days to make the factory look less like a disaster and more like something worth preserving. 4 days to convince someone with authority that this building deserved to exist. I'll be there, Elena said. She hung up and looked around the office at the progress she'd made that still amounted to almost nothing. The building was a wreck. An inspector would see that immediately. Would see the fire damage, the broken windows, the lack of functioning utilities. Would see a structure that should be demolished and a woman foolish enough to think she could save it. Carmen called that evening. Elena almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Just checking to see if you've come to your senses yet. Carmen said, no greeting, no pleasantries. I'm making it work. Elena, be realistic. Carlos drove by that factory yesterday. He said it looks like it should be torn down. You can't seriously be living there with Sophia. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. We're fine. No, you're not. You're homeless, living in a condemned building with no heat, no power, no running water. That's not fine. That's borderline child endangerment. The words hit like a punch. Don't you dare. I'm doing everything I can take. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're playing house in a death trap. There are resources for people in your situation, Elena. Shelters, programs, help. But you have to actually ask for it instead of making grand gestures that put Sophia at risk. I'm not putting her at risk. We have shelter. We have food. We're safe. Carmen's laugh was sharp. You're delusional. And when that building collapses on you, or when social services finally catches up with you, don't come crying to me. I try to help. You chose this. You chose to steal $8,000 from me and then kick me out when I needed you most. Don't pretend you're trying to help. That money was a loan, and I paid you back. You never paid back a single dollar. You spent it all and then invented a version of history where I was the problem. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Carmen's voice, colder than Elena had ever heard it. You know what? You deserve everything that's happening to you. You make terrible choices and then blame everyone else when they don't work out. Good luck with your factory. I hope it's worth losing your daughter over. She hung up. Elena sat in the darkness of the office and shook with rage she couldn't afford to feel. Carmen was wrong. She had to be wrong. Elena was giving Sophia a chance, giving them both a chance. The factory wasn't perfect, wasn't safe, wasn't what any parenting book would recommend. But it was theirs, and Elena would make it work because the alternative was unthinkable. The next 3 days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. Elena worked from dawn until well after dark, using every trick she'd learned from years of making broken things functional. She boarded up the most egregious window damage with plywood she found in the basement. She cleared debris from the main floor until you could walk through without tripping. She organized the worst of the fire damage into a contained area that could be cordoned off. She couldn't fix everything, couldn't hide the building's fundamental issues. But she could at least show that someone cared, that the factory wasn't completely abandoned, that it deserved a chance. The night before the inspection, Elena lay in the sleeping bag beside Sophia and tried not to think about worst-case scenarios. The inspector could order immediate demolition, could call social services about Sophia, could fine Elena for occupying a condemned building, could end this desperate experiment before it had a chance to become something real. "Mama, you're thinking too loud," Sophia mumbled, half asleep. "I can hear your brain from here." Elena smiled despite her anxiety. "Sorry, baby. I'll think quieter. It's going to be okay. The building inspector man will see how good you made it and let us stay." "How do you know?" "Because you're magic at fixing things. You fixed our car like 100 times. You fixed my favorite stuffed elephant when his ear came off. You'll fix this too." Sophia's faith was absolute, unearned, the kind of trust children give before life teaches them to doubt. Elena held her daughter close and tried to believe it might be true. Robert Walsh arrived exactly at 10 a.m. in a city truck marked Cleveland Building Department. He was in his 50s, weathered and serious, carrying a clipboard and camera and an expression that had seen too many condemned buildings to be impressed by anything. "Ms. Martinez?" "That's me." He looked at the factory, then at her, then at Sophia, who stood in the doorway, trying to be invisible. "You're living here? I own the property. I'm in the process of making repairs." Walsh wrote something on his clipboard. This building was condemned in 2019 following the fire. Condemnation order cited structural damage, no utilities, safety hazards. Has any of that changed? I've made some repairs. Cleared debris, secured windows, made certain areas safe. Let's take a look. They walked through the factory for 2 hours. Walsh examined everything with the thorough attention of someone who took his job seriously. He photographed damage, measured structural elements, tested railings and stairs. He wrote constantly on his clipboard, face revealing nothing. When they reached the second-floor offices where Elena had created their living space, he paused. "This is where you're staying?" "Yes." He examined the plastic-covered windows, the sleeping bags, the camping stove, the bathroom with the green tiles. "Ms. Martinez, I can't approve this as a residential dwelling. It doesn't meet any housing code requirements. No heat, no approved water source, fire safety violations throughout. I understand it's not perfect, but it's better than the car we were living in before." Walsh stopped writing and looked at her directly. "You were homeless?" "For 7 months. Sophia and I slept in our car, rotated between parking lots, tried to stay invisible. I bought this building because it was the only shelter I could afford." Walsh's expression shifted slightly, the professional mask cracking just enough to show the human underneath. "Look, I sympathize with your situation. I really do. But sympathy doesn't change code requirements. This building is condemned for good reasons. Living here is dangerous. What are my options? Apply for permits to make necessary repairs. Bring utilities up to code. Address structural issues. Hire licensed contractors for anything involving electrical, plumbing, gas. Once everything meets code, you can apply to have the condemnation lifted. How much would all that cost?" Walsh hesitated. "Honestly, You're looking at $200,000 minimum, probably more like $300,000 to do it right. And that's assuming the structure is sound enough to warrant the investment. Elena felt something in her chest collapse. $300,000 might as well be $300 million. She had $0 in debts she'd been avoiding. She had no credit, no assets, no way to get a loan. So what happens now? I have to file my report. Recommend the condemnation order remain in place. The city will probably move forward with demolition proceedings within the next 6-12 months. I'm sorry, Ms. Martinez. He walked toward his truck. Elena followed, Sophia trailing behind. Mr. Walsh, please. If you condemn this building, we lose everything. I know it's not up to code. I know it needs work. But it's all we have. Walsh stopped, turned. Where will you go if the building is demolished? I don't know. Back to the car, probably. Hope we can survive another winter. He looked at Sophia, then back at Elena. I'll delay my report for 30 days. Give you a chance to make some basic improvements, show progress. But Ms. Martinez, you need to understand something. I can't approve this as a residence. Not in its current condition. And if you're still living here when I come back, I'll have to report it to Child Protective Services. I don't want to do that, but I have a legal obligation. I understand. Thank you for the extra time. Walsh drove away. Elena stood in the parking lot and felt the full weight of impossibility. 30 days. She had 30 days to make $300,000 worth of repairs with $0 and no way to get it. 30 days to prove that buying this factory wasn't the worst decision she'd ever made. Sophia took her hand. We'll fix it, Mama. Together, we'll figure it out. Elena wanted to believe that, needed to believe it. But for the first time since buying the factory, she felt the crushing certainty that Carmen had been right. This was a death trap, an expensive mistake, a fantasy that would end with them back in the car or worse, separated, with Elena losing custody because she'd been too proud to ask for help the right way. That night, unable to sleep, Elena returned to Harold's office. She sat at his desk and opened the journal, reading by flashlight, looking for answers from a dead man who'd faced impossible choices. She found an entry from 2017 that stopped her cold. I've made a decision. The factory is dying. My children want to sell everything, liquidate, move on. But I can't let it all be for nothing. I can't let 50 years of work just disappear. So I've created something else. A backup plan. A way to preserve not just the building, but what it represented. The values. The commitment. The belief that good work matters. I've hidden it where no one will think to look. Where only someone who truly cares about this place will find it. Someone who sees past the broken machinery and fire damage to what this building could be. Someone desperate enough to buy an abandoned factory and brave enough to try making it home. If you're reading this, if you found the journal and kept reading, then you're probably that someone. And you need to know, there's more here than meets the eye. The factory holds secrets, wealth preserved for whoever proves worthy by simply refusing to give up. Look for the wall that doesn't quite match. Find the door that was meant to be found. Solve the puzzle I've left behind. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that sometimes broken things are exactly where the valuable things hide. Elena read the entry 3 times, her heart pounding. The wall in this office, the one with the newer mortar and hollow echo. The locked door in the basement with the high-security lock. The feeling that something was off, that the building held secrets. Harold had hidden something, deliberately, for someone who would care enough to look. Elena stood and went to the wall, ran her hands across the bricks, feeling the difference in the mortar. She'd noticed it before, but dismissed it as simple repair work. Now she looked closer, more carefully, with the understanding that nothing in this building was accidental. The bricks were definitely newer than the surrounding wall, maybe installed in the last decade based on their condition. And behind them, she was certain now, was space. A hollow that shouldn't exist unless Harold had created it intentionally. Elena grabbed her crowbar and began carefully working at the mortar joints. The mortar was strong, properly installed, but she was patient. She worked at one brick for 20 minutes before it finally loosened, then another, then another. The work was slow, methodical, each brick revealing a little more of what lay behind. When she'd removed a dozen bricks, creating a hole about 2 feet square. Elena shined her flashlight into the darkness beyond and saw a door. Not just any door. A vault door. Heavy steel, circular handle, combination dial, the kind banks used before everything went digital. Embedded into a wall that had been hidden by the brick facade. Elena's hands shook as she removed more bricks, revealing the full vault door. It was beautiful in its way, engineered precision from an era when things were built to last. The combination dial was marked with numbers from 0 to 99. The handle looked like it weighed 50 pounds. This was what Harold had hidden. A vault. In his office. Behind a fake wall. Preserved for whoever bought his failed factory and cared enough to investigate. Elena pulled out the journal and read the entry again. Solve the puzzle I've left behind. The combination had to be somewhere. Harold wouldn't have hidden a vault without leaving a way to open it. He documented everything else in the journal with obsessive detail. The combination would be there too, encoded somehow, waiting for someone to notice. Elena spent the next hour reading through the journal page by page, looking for patterns, numbers that repeated, dates that seemed significant. Harold's birthday appeared multiple times, June 12th. His wife Eleanor's birthday, March 3rd. Their anniversary, September 15th. The factory's founding date, June 12th, 1963. The date he closed the factory, March 18th, 2018. None of them felt right. Too obvious. Too simple. Harold had been methodical, creative. The combination would be something meaningful, but not immediate. Then Elena noticed something in the margins. Throughout the journal, Harold had doodle numbers while thinking. Little calculations, sketches, notations. Most were random, business-related figures. But 3 numbers appeared over and over, usually circled or emphasized. 55, 28, 17. They appeared in different contexts, different years, different entries. Sometimes separate, sometimes together. 55-28-17, like a combination. Elena approached the vault door. The dial turned smoothly, well-maintained despite the building's abandonment. She rotated right to 55, then left to 28, then right to 17. The mechanism inside the vault clicked. Deep, solid, the sound of heavy bolts disengaging. Elena pulled the handle. It moved with surprising ease, counterweight and balanced. The vault door swung open on silent hinges, revealing darkness beyond. She pointed her flashlight into the vault and saw what Harold Barrington had preserved. What he'd hidden for whoever was desperate enough to buy an abandoned factory and brave enough to look. And Elena Martinez, standing in a condemned building with $0 to her name and 29 days until an inspection that could end everything, discovered that sometimes broken things really were exactly where valuable things hid. Elena's flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the vault, and what she saw made her legs weak enough that she had to grip the door frame for support. The space beyond was perhaps 12 feet deep and 8 feet wide, carved directly into the building's foundation. And it was full. Metal shelving lined both walls, floor to ceiling, organized with the same meticulous care Harold had brought to everything else in his life. The shelves held boxes, each one labeled in Harold's precise handwriting with dates and inventory numbers. Stack after stack, row after row, years of accumulation preserved in climate-controlled darkness. But it was the center of the vault that held Elena's attention. A workbench sat there, and on it lay items that caught the flashlight beam and threw it back in glints of gold and silver. Coins arranged in careful rows. Bars of something that looked like precious metal. A wooden box opened to reveal jewelry that sparkled even in the weak light. Elena stepped inside the vault, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The air smelled different here, drier, controlled. She swept the flashlight across the shelves, reading labels. Gold American Eagles, 1986 to 1995. Silver certificates, 1920s to 1950s. Corporate bonds, various. Investment grade diamonds, certified. Rare coins, Morgan dollars. Her hands shook as she opened the nearest box. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were gold coins. Dozens of them. each one in a protective plastic case with a label indicating weight, purity, year of minting. Elena had no idea what gold was worth, but she knew these weren't costume jewelry or collectibles from a hobby shop. These were real, heavy, valuable. She opened another box. Silver coins this time, larger than the gold ones, stacked in tubes that filled the entire container. More labels, more inventory numbers, more of Harold's obsessive documentation. A file folder sat on the workbench, marked Vault Inventory, Final Assessment, October 2018. Elena opened it with trembling fingers and found page after page of spreadsheets. Items listed by category, acquisition dates, purchase prices, estimated current values. The numbers made her dizzy. Gold reserves, coins and bars approximately 450 troy ounces. Current market value, $675,000. Silver holdings, various forms, approximately 8,000 troy ounces. Current market value, $196,000. Rare currency collection, 347 pieces. Estimated collector value, $8,200,000. Investment grade diamonds, 42 carats total. Certified value, $4,300,000. The list went on, and on, and on. Stock certificates from companies Elena recognized, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, purchased in the 1980s and 1990s when they'd been cheap. Bearer bonds from corporations that had grown exponentially. Real estate deeds to properties in Cleveland that had somehow maintained value even as the industrial corridor died. At the bottom of the final page, Harold had written a summary in his careful hand. Total estimated value of vault contents as of October 1st, 2018, $425 million. $425 million. Elena read the number 3 times before her brain would accept it as real. $425 million. Hidden in a vault behind a fake wall in an abandoned factory she'd bought for $600. She sank down onto the vault floor, back against the cold metal shelving, and tried to breathe normally. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Homeless single mothers didn't stumble into hundreds of millions of dollars. That was lottery winner territory, inheritance from unknown rich relatives territory, fantasy territory. But the vault was real. The gold was real. The spreadsheet with Harold's meticulous documentation was real. And it was all sitting in a building that legally belonged to Elena Martinez. She found a letter tucked into the back of the folder. Envelope marked to whoever opens this vault. Elena's hands shook as she unfolded the pages. Dear Finder, if you're reading this, then several things must be true. You bought my factory. You explore it instead of just demolishing it. You found my journal. You read it carefully enough to find the clues. You solved the combination. You cared. That matters more than you might realize. I've hidden this wealth specifically for someone who would care enough to look. Someone who saw potential in a broken building that everyone else dismissed. Someone who needed it desperately enough to take a chance on an abandoned factory. I spent 55 years building Barrington leather manufacturing. At our peak, we employed 300 people. We made quality products. We paid fair wages. We were proof that American manufacturing could succeed if you worked hard enough and cared enough about your people. But the world changed. Overseas competition made it impossible to compete. Technology made our methods obsolete. The economy shifted in ways that made small manufacturing unsustainable. By 2018, I had 42 employees left, and I couldn't even make payroll. I closed the factory in March 2018. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Worse than losing my wife. Worse than any business setback. Because I wasn't just closing a building. I was ending something that had given meaning to hundreds of lives over half a century. But I'm a practical man. I saw the decline coming years before it arrived. And I prepared. Starting in 1985, I began converting profits into portable wealth. Gold, silver, rare collectibles, stocks in companies I believed would survive the changing economy. I built this vault in 2000 when I renovated the office wing. I filled it methodically over 18 years, creating a hedge against the collapse I knew was coming. The factory died, but the wealth it generated lives on in this vault. I have no children of my own. My siblings' children want nothing to do with a failed businessman who wouldn't sell out soon enough to preserve his wealth. They'll inherit my house and whatever liquid assets remain after estate settlement. They don't deserve more. But you, whoever you are, you've proven something important. You took a risk on a broken building. You explored instead of destroying. You solved a puzzle that required patience and attention and care. That makes you exactly the kind of person who should have this wealth. Everything in this vault is legally mine, purchased with legitimate funds, properly documented. The estate lawyers don't know it exists. I made certain of that. When you bought the factory, you bought everything in it. That's clearly stated in the property deed. All structures and improvements, all contents and holdings. This vault and everything in it are legally yours. Use it wisely. Use it well. Don't hoard it the way I might have. Don't let fear of losing it prevent you from living. Build something meaningful. Help people who need help. Prove that sometimes the broken things are worth fixing. And maybe, just maybe, prove that good things can still happen to people who refuse to give up. With respect and hope. Harold Barrington, October 3rd, 2018. Elena read the letter twice, then a third time. Each reading made it feel more impossible and more real simultaneously. Harold had done this deliberately. Hidden a fortune, left clues, structured the property transfer to make it all legally hers. He'd planned for this exact scenario. Someone desperate enough to buy an abandoned factory, discovering wealth beyond imagination. She stood slowly, legs unsteady, and examined the vault more carefully. Every box was labeled, every item documented. Harold's organization was obsessive, almost compulsive. He treated wealth preservation like a military operation, everything planned and executed with precision. Elena opened another box at random. Stock certificates, the old-fashioned paper kind. 100 shares of Microsoft, purchased in December 1986 at $21 per share. She pulled out her phone, searched for the current Microsoft stock price. $370 per share. She did the math. Those 100 shares were worth $37,000. And that was just one certificate in a box that held dozens more. Another box held diamond stones in small plastic containers, each one with a gemological certificate attached. One stone was labeled 3.2 carat, internally flawless, D-color. Certified value $285,000. For a single diamond. The box held. Elena's mind raced through implications. She was standing in a condemned factory with no utilities, $0 in her bank account, and 29 days until an inspection that would likely result in demolition. But she also owned $425 million in portable, liquid wealth that could solve every problem she'd ever had. Except she had no idea how to access it. She couldn't just walk into a bank with gold coins and diamonds and ask to cash them in. She had no credentials, no financial history that would support suddenly claiming wealth. She'd be suspected of theft immediately, investigated, probably arrested, and even if she could prove ownership, there would be taxes. Capital gains, probably. She'd need accountants, lawyers, professionals who cost money she didn't have. The irony was brutal. She owned hundreds of millions, but couldn't afford to access it. Elena closed the vault carefully, her mind spinning. She needed to think, to plan, to figure out how to handle this without everything exploding. But first, she needed to tell Sophia. Her daughter deserved to know that everything was about to change. She found Sophia asleep in her makeshift bedroom, curled around her stuffed elephant. Elena sat on the sleeping bag beside her, watching her daughter's peaceful face, and tried to process what had just happened. They'd gone from homeless to what? Rich? Secure? She didn't even know what to call it. When Sophia woke an hour later, Elena pulled her close. "Baby, I found something. Something Harold left in the building." Sophia blinked sleep from her eyes. "Like treasure." "Yes, like treasure. A lot of treasure. Enough that we'll never have to worry about money again." Sophia's eyes went wide. "Really? We're rich." "Maybe. Probably. But we can't tell anyone yet. Okay?" This has to be our secret until I figure out how to handle it properly. Sophia nodded solemnly. I'm good at secrets. I kept the secret about living in the car from the kids at school for a really long time. The reminder made Elena's chest ache. Sophia had spent months lying to classmates about why she wore the same clothes, why she never invited anyone over, why she always looked tired. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to carry those secrets, shouldn't have to protect her mother's pride by hiding their poverty. But now things would change. Elena would make sure of it. The next morning brought new challenges. Elena sat in the office with Harold's vault inventory spread before her, trying to understand what she actually owned and how to convert it into usable resources. The gold was straightforward. Current price around $1,900 per ounce, times 450 ounces meant roughly $850,000. But selling it would raise questions. Where did a homeless woman get 450 ounces of gold? The rare coins were more complex. Some were valuable for their gold content, others for their rarity. A Morgan dollar from 1889 listed in the inventory with an estimated value of $45,000. Elena had no idea how to even get something like that appraised without triggering suspicion. The stock certificates were potentially easier. If they were still valid, if the companies honored the old paper shares, she could potentially transfer them to a brokerage account. But that would require proving ownership, showing the chain of custody, explaining how she'd acquired them. Every path to accessing the wealth seemed blocked by practical obstacles. Elena needed help, professional help, the kind that cost money she didn't have. Her phone rang. Carmen, of course. Elena almost didn't answer, but avoiding family only delayed the inevitable. I heard you had a building inspection, Carmen said. No greeting. Carlos knows someone who works for the city. They said Robert Walsh filed a preliminary report recommending continued condemnation. Elena's stomach dropped. He gave me 30 days to show progress. Progress toward what? Elena, you don't have the money to fix that building. You know it. I know it. The inspector knows it. This fantasy needs to end before Sophia gets hurt. We're not going to get hurt. Really? Because I'm hearing the roof is partially collapsed, that there's fire damage throughout, that you're living in a section without heat or proper sanitation. That's not safe, Elena. That's not responsible parenting. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. I'm doing the best I can. Your best isn't good enough. Look, I've been thinking. You need help whether you want to admit it or not. Carlos and I could co-sign on a lease for you. Small apartment, nothing fancy. But it will be safe. It will be warm. Sophia could have a normal childhood. The offer sounded generous. It wasn't. Elena recognized the pattern. Carmen extending help that came with strings attached, with expectations of gratitude and submission. The kind of help designed to make Elena dependent, to prove Carmen was the responsible sister. What would that cost me? Carmen's pause was telling. Just acknowledgement that you need help, that you can't do this alone. Maybe some gratitude for family that's willing to step up when you've made bad decisions. There it was. The cost wasn't money. It was pride, dignity, autonomy. Carmen wanted Elena to admit defeat, to accept that the factory was a mistake, to come crawling back, dependent and chastened. I appreciate the offer, Elena said carefully. But we're fine. You're not fine. You're living in a condemned building with no plan and no resources. When are you going to accept reality? I'll call you later, Carmen. Elena hung up before her sister could respond. She sat in the cold office and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down. She had $425 million in a vault beneath her feet, but accessing it seemed as impossible as earning it honestly would have been. She had a building inspector returning in 28 days, expecting repairs she couldn't afford. She had a sister ready to call social services if Elena didn't submit to her version of help. And she had one daughter who deserved better than this impossible situation. Elena opened Harold's journal again, reading through entries with new understanding. He'd faced similar impossible choices. The factory dying, money running out, everyone telling him to give up and cut his losses. But he'd refused. He'd found a way to preserve what mattered, even if the building itself was failing. One entry from 2016 caught her attention. I met with Jacob Rosenberg today, estate planning attorney, recommended by my accountant. I told him about the vault, about my concerns that the estate would be liquidated incorrectly if I died suddenly. Jacob suggested structuring everything to pass outside normal probate channels. The key, he said, is making the wealth part of the property itself. Not personal assets held in a building, but improvements to the building that transfer with the deed. Legally, once that vault is sealed into the structure, everything in it becomes part of the real property. Whoever buys the building buys the contents. Smart man, Jacob. I'm taking his advice. The vault is now legally considered a structural improvement, documented in renovation permits from 2000. Everything in it passes with the property deed. Clean, simple, no estate complications. Elena read the passage 3 times. Harold had structured this deliberately to make the wealth part of the property. That meant when she bought the factory, she bought the vault contents. Legally, clearly, without any questions about estate claims or inheritance tax. She pulled out her phone and searched for Jacob Rosenberg, estate attorney, Cleveland. Found him immediately. Still practicing, office in downtown Cleveland, specializing in complex estate planning. Elena called before she could second-guess herself. The receptionist answered on the second ring. Rosenberg and Associates. Hi, my name is Elena Martinez. I recently purchased property at 4751 Industrial Parkway, the old Barrington leather factory. I understand Mr. Rosenberg worked with the previous owner, Harold Barrington. A pause. May I ask what this is regarding? I found some of Harold's documents. They reference work Mr. Rosenberg did on estate planning. I have questions about the property transfer. Another pause. Hold, please. 60 seconds later, a man's voice. This is Jacob Rosenberg. You bought Harold's factory. Yes, at county auction 2 weeks ago. Interesting. And you found documents. His journal. And other things. I think I need legal advice about what I've found. Jacob's voice sharpened with interest. Ms. Martinez, can you come to my office this afternoon? This sounds like a conversation we should have in person. They agreed on 3 p.m. Elena arranged for Sophia to stay with a neighbor in one of the few occupied buildings nearby, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chun who'd been kind when they'd first moved in. Then Elena drove to downtown Cleveland in the Accord, praying the car would make it there and back. Jacob Rosenberg's office occupied the 10th floor of a building that spoke of old money and established success. Mahogany furniture, leather chairs, artwork on walls that looked original rather than printed. The kind of place where Elena normally wouldn't be welcome, where her worn jacket and scuffed shoes marked her as someone who didn't belong. But Jacob himself was different than expected. Mid-60s, warm smile, the kind of eyes that assessed quickly but didn't judge. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Tell me what you found. Elena told him everything. The auction, the factory, the journal, the vault, Harold's letter, the inventory showing $425 million in assets. She showed him photos she'd taken on her phone, careful documentation of the labels and inventory sheets. Jacob studied the photos silently for several minutes. Then he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Harold actually did it. He talked about this plan, but I wasn't sure he'd follow through. He wanted to create a treasure hunt, essentially. Leave wealth for someone who'd care enough about the factory to explore it. Is it legal? Do I actually own what's in that vault? Absolutely. When I structured Harold's estate plan, we classified the vault and its contents as structural improvements to the property. That was deliberate. It means everything in that vault transferred with the property deed. You bought the building, you bought the contents. Clear title, no estate claims, no inheritance complications. Elena felt something in her chest unclench. So I can access it? Use it. With proper handling, yes. But Ms. Martinez, we need to be strategic. If you suddenly deposit $425 million worth of assets, you'll trigger every alarm the IRS has. We need to establish your ownership clearly, document everything, and liquidate assets gradually in ways that don't raise red flags. How long would that take? Jacob considered. Done properly? 6 months to a year. We'd start by establishing the vault's existence officially. File amended property records showing the discovery. Get professional appraisals for everything. Set up proper legal structures for holding assets. Then begin systematic liquidation, paying taxes as we go, keeping everything transparent and documented. I don't have 6 months. I have 28 days before a building inspector returns and probably condemns the property for demolition. Jacob frowned. That's a problem. You need access to capital now to make repairs and prove the building is salvageable. But accessing the vault wealth takes time to do legally. What if I just sold some gold, took it to a dealer, converted it to cash? You'd trigger immediate suspicion. Where did a homeless woman get gold? You'd be investigated for theft. The whole thing could unravel before you establish ownership properly. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jacob opened his desk drawer and pulled out a checkbook. I'm going to loan you $50,000. Personal loan, interest-free, due when you sell your first assets. That should be enough for emergency repairs to show the building inspector you're making progress. It buys us time to handle the vault wealth problem. Elena stared at him. Why would you do that? Because Harold was my friend. Because he wanted someone like you to have that wealth. Because you're trying to do the right thing and being punished for it. Jacob wrote out a check with swift strokes. Also, because you're going to need an attorney to handle all this, and I'd like to be that attorney. Call it an investment in a future client relationship. He slid the check across the desk. Elena looked at it, at her name written in Jacob's neat hand, at the number that represented more immediate help than she'd had in years. I don't know what to say. Say you'll hire licensed contractors to fix the most critical issues. Say you'll document everything properly. Say you'll trust me to handle the legal complexities while you focus on saving that building. Can you do that? Elena took the check with trembling hands. Yes. Over the next 2 weeks, the factory transformed. Elena hired contractors recommended by Jacob, licensed professionals who asked no questions about where the money came from. An electrician examined the wiring, determined most of it was salvageable, and restored power to the second floor where Elena and Sophia lived. Lights flickered on for the first time in years. Outlets worked. The refrigerator in the break room hummed to life. A plumber assessed the water system, replaced corroded pipes, installed new fixtures in the bathroom. When Elena turned the tap and water flowed clear and cold, Sophia actually cheered. A heating contractor examined the boilers. The fire-damaged one was scrap, but the second unit was reparable. He installed a new gas line, replaced damaged components, and got it running. Heat began flowing through radiators throughout the second floor. The offices went from freezing to comfortable within hours. A roofer patched the collapsed section, installed temporary weatherproofing, and gave Elena an estimate for complete roof replacement. You're looking at $85,000 for a proper job, but this patch will hold through winter. Give you time to save up. Elena paid him and thanked him and tried not to smile at the irony. She had $425 million in a vault, but was being advised to save up for an $85,000 roof. With utilities functioning, Elena focused on making the space livable. She bought real beds from a thrift store, a table and chairs, a sofa that had seen better days but was clean and comfortable. She set up Sophia's room properly. Real furniture, a desk for homework, posters on walls, curtains on windows. A child's room that looked like a child lived there. Sophia explored their improving home with wonder, running from room to room, testing light switches, touching radiators that were actually warm. Mama, we have heat. Real heat, not just jackets and blankets. I know, baby. And lights. I can read at night without a flashlight. The joy on her daughter's face was worth every penny Jacob had loaned. More than that, it was proof that Elena had been right to buy the factory, right to refuse Carmen's conditional help, right to believe something better was possible. But the improvements cost money faster than expected. The $50,000 Jacob had loaned was nearly gone. Elena had spent $8,000 on electrical repairs, $12,000 on plumbing, $15,000 on heating, $6,000 on the temporary roof patch, and another $7,000 on furniture and basic necessities. That left barely $2,000 for anything else that might arise before the inspector returned. And things did arise. The water heater failed 2 days after being installed, needed replacement. The electrical panel couldn't handle modern loads, required upgrading. Sophia needed new winter clothes because she'd grown out of everything she owned. The Accord transmission finally gave up completely, died in a parking lot, cost $1,800 to repair. Elena watched the borrowed money disappear and felt panic building. She made progress, yes. The building was safer, warmer, more livable. But was it enough to convince an inspector to lift the condemnation? And what happened when the money ran out before she could access the vault wealth properly? Carmen called on a Tuesday evening, 3 days before the follow-up inspection. I saw lights on at the factory when Carlos drove by. You actually got power working. Yes. How? Elena, you were broke. Where did the money come from? Elena had prepared for this question. A loan from a friend. What friend? You don't have any friends with money. Who would loan you anything? Someone who believed in what I'm trying to do. Carmen's laugh was sharp. Right. Sure. You're hiding something, Elena. I know you are. No one just gives money to homeless people out of the goodness of their hearts. What did you do? Who did you sleep with? What deal did you make? The accusations hit like slaps. Carmen couldn't accept that someone might help Elena without an ulterior motive because Carmen herself never helped without expecting something in return. I have to go. Sophia needs dinner. Wait, I'm serious, Elena. If you're involved in something illegal, if you're putting Sophia at risk, I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm fixing a property I legally own. Then prove it. Let me come see the factory. Show me what you've done. If it's all legitimate, you shouldn't have any problem with that. Elena almost agreed, then caught herself. If Carmen saw the progress, she'd know Elena had significant resources. She'd ask more questions, push harder, potentially discover the vault. And Carmen was exactly the kind of person who'd claim family entitlement to wealth that wasn't hers. Not yet. When it's finished, I'll give you a tour. But not while we're still working on it. Because you're hiding something. I knew it. God, Elena, when are you going to stop lying and admit you need help? Elena hung up. She sat in the office that was now properly heated and lit, comfortable in a way she hadn't experienced in months, and felt the walls closing in. Carmen was circling, suspicious, ready to cause problems. The inspector was coming in 3 days. The borrowed money was gone, and $425 million sat in a vault Elena couldn't access without months of legal process. Jacob called the next morning. Good news. I got the vault appraised by a certified professional. Everything Harold documented is accurate, possibly conservative. Current market values put the total closer to $445 million. We're ready to start the legal process of establishing your ownership. How long? 4 months minimum. We need to file property amendments, get everything officially documented, set up corporate structures for asset management. Then we can begin systematic liquidation. For months, Elena had 3 days until the inspector arrived and maybe 2 weeks of money left to survive on. For months, might as well be 4 years. Can we accelerate anything? I'm running out of time here. Jacob hesitated. There is one option. High risk, but possible. We could take a small portion of the vault contents, say $100,000 in gold, and sell it quickly through private channels. No official documentation, just cash transaction. It would give you breathing room while we handle the larger assets properly. Is that legal? It's gray area. The gold is legally yours. Selling it isn't illegal. But doing so without proper documentation could raise questions later. However, if the alternative is losing the building before we can establish ownership of the vault, it might be worth the risk. Elena thought about Sophia sleeping in a warm bed for the first time in 8 months. About having power and water and heat. About being so close to security and having it threatened by bureaucratic timing. Do it. Sell $100,000 worth. Give me cash to make it through the next few months. I'll handle it personally. Should have cash for you within a week. The building inspector arrived exactly on time Wednesday morning. Robert Walsh looked around the second floor with expressions that shifted from skepticism to grudging approval. You've made significant progress. Power, water, heat all functional. Yes, sir. All permitted and inspected by licensed contractors. Walsh tested outlets, ran taps, checked the radiators. He examined the roof patch, nodded at the temporary weatherproofing. He reviewed permits and contractor licenses Elena had carefully documented. The main manufacturing floor is still hazardous. Fire damage hasn't been addressed. But this section, he gestured around the second floor. This could be approved for occupancy. It's not conventional residential, but it meets basic safety standards. Does that mean the condemnation could be lifted? For this section, possibly. I'll recommend limited occupancy permit for the second floor offices. That gives you legal right to live here while making further repairs. Main floor and third floor remain Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but forced them back. Thank you. Walsh's expression softened. You worked hard. Most people who buy these condemned properties give up when they see what's involved. You pushed through. That counts for something. After he left, Elena sat in the office and let herself cry. Not from sadness or stress, but from relief so profound it physically hurt. They could stay. Legally. With utilities and safety and stability. Sophia could have a real home. The $100,000 in cash arrived 5 days later, delivered by Jacob in a briefcase that looked like something from a spy movie. He counted it out on Harold's desk, stacks of hundreds that represented freedom and possibility. This is to hold you over while we process the legal ownership of the vault contents. Don't deposit it all at once. Use cash for everything you can. Keep a low profile until we've got everything properly documented. Elena took the cash and hid in the vault, behind boxes of silver coins. It felt surreal, hiding cash in a vault that contained hundreds of millions more. But it was breathing room, time to figure out the future without the immediate panic of survival. Carmen showed up unannounced the following Tuesday. Elena heard the knock and found her sister standing in what was now a proper entryway, looking around with an expression that cycled through confusion and suspicion and something that might have been grudging respect. You actually did it. You fixed this place. I'm working on it. Carmen walked through the space, examining everything. The furniture, the working lights, the warm radiators. She found Sophia's room with its proper bed and desk and decorations. Her eyes narrowed. Where did the money come from, Elena? And don't tell me a loan from a friend. This is thousands of dollars in repairs. Exactly what I said. Someone believed in what I was trying to do. Who? What's their name? How do you know them? Elena kept her voice steady. That's between me and them. Carmen turned, face flushed with anger. You're lying. You're involved in something, and I'm going to find out what it is. Because I know you, Elena. I know you don't have wealthy friends. I know you don't have resources. So either you're doing something illegal, or you're sleeping with someone, or you're hiding something major. Or maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Maybe you've spent so much time assuming I'm incompetent that you can't accept when I actually succeed at something. Succeed? You bought a condemned factory with your last dollar and got lucky. That's not success. That's reckless gambling that happened to work out. For now, what happens when your mysterious benefactor wants something in return? What happens when whatever scheme you're running falls apart? Sophia appeared in the doorway, watching them argue. Carmen's expression shifted when she saw her niece, became softer, more calculating. Sophia, honey, how are you? Is your mom taking good care of you? Sophia looked at Elena, then back at Carmen. Her voice was carefully neutral. We're fine. Really? Because I worry about you. Living in a factory, even one that's been fixed up, it's not normal. Wouldn't you rather have a regular house? Regular life? I like it here, Sophia said. I have my own room. We have heat and lights. Mama made it safe. Carmen knelt down to Sophia's level. But sweetie, don't you miss having friends over? Having a yard to play in? Living somewhere that's actually meant for families? Elena stepped forward. That's enough, Carmen. Sophia's fine. We're fine. You can see we're safe and stable now. So unless you actually need something, I think it's time for you to go. Carmen stood slowly. I'm going to find out what you're hiding. And when I do, when this all falls apart, don't come crying to me. You made your choices. You deal with the consequences. She left in a slam of doors and angry footsteps. Sophia looked up at Elena with worried eyes. Is Aunt Carmen going to make trouble for us? She might try, but we haven't done anything wrong, baby. We're just living in a building we legally own, making improvements with money someone legally loaned us. She can't hurt us. But even as Elena said it, she felt doubt creeping in. Carmen was determined, spiteful when she felt excluded or challenged. She'd dig into Elena's life, looking for vulnerabilities. And while everything was technically legal, it was also strange enough to raise questions. How had a homeless woman suddenly secured major loans? Where was the money really coming from? What was Elena hiding? If Carmen pushed hard enough, if she brought authorities into it, if she forced premature disclosure of the vault before Jacob had everything properly documented, it could all unravel. Elena returned to the vault that night after Sophia was asleep. She needed to see it, to confirm it was real, to reassure herself that everything she was risking was worth protecting. The vault door opened smoothly, the combination now memorized. Inside, under LED work lights she'd installed, the wealth gleamed. She opened boxes at random, examining contents with new understanding. This wasn't just money. This was Harold's life work, converted into physical form. Every gold coin represented a business decision made decades ago. Every stock certificate was a bet on a company's future. Every diamond was proof that even in the middle of running a failing factory, Harold had planned for a future he wouldn't live to see. Elena found another letter tucked into a box she hadn't opened before. This one dated October 5th, 2018, just days before Harold died. To my heir, it's been 2 days since I sealed the vault and created the puzzle. I'm dying. Cancer, aggressive and fast. The doctors give me weeks at most. I'm writing this in what might be my final days of clarity. I've been thinking about wealth and what it means. I built Barrington Leather from nothing, employed hundreds, created value. It all died anyway. Not because I failed, but because the world moved on. Sophia, honey, how are you? Is your mom taking good care of you? Sophia looked at Elena, then back at Carmen. Her voice was carefully neutral. We're fine. Really? Because I worry about you. Living in a factory, even one that's been fixed up, it's not normal. Wouldn't you rather have a regular house? Regular life? I like it here, Sophia said. I have my own room. We have heat and lights. Mama made it safe. Carmen knelt down to Sophia's level. But sweetie, don't you miss having friends over? Having a yard to play in? Living somewhere that's actually meant for families? Elena stepped forward. That's enough, Carmen. Sophia's fine. We're fine. You can see we're safe and stable now. So unless you actually need something, I think it's time for you to go. Carmen stood slowly. I'm going to find out what you're hiding. And when I do, when this all falls apart, don't come crying to me. You made your choices. You deal with the consequences. She left in a slam of doors and angry footsteps. Sophia looked up at Elena with worried eyes. Is Aunt Carmen going to make trouble for us? She might try, but we haven't done anything wrong, baby. We're just living in a building we legally own, making improvements with money someone legally loaned us. She can't hurt us. But even as Elena said it, she felt doubt creeping in. Carmen was determined, spiteful when she felt excluded or challenged. She'd dig into Elena's life, looking for vulnerabilities. And while everything was technically legal, it was also strange enough to raise questions. How had a homeless woman suddenly secured major loans? Where was the money really coming from? What was Elena hiding? If Carmen pushed hard enough, if she brought authorities into it, if she forced premature disclosure of the vault before Jacob had everything properly documented, it could all unravel. Elena returned to the vault that night after Sophia was asleep. She needed to see it, to confirm it was real, to reassure herself that everything she was risking was worth protecting. The vault door opened smoothly, the combination now memorized. Inside, under LED work lights she'd installed, the wealth gleamed. She opened boxes at random, examining contents with new understanding. This wasn't just money. This was Harold's life work, converted into physical form. Every gold coin represented a business decision made decades ago. Every stock certificate was a bet on a company's future. Every diamond was proof that even in the middle of running a failing factory, Harold had planned for a future he wouldn't live to see. Elena found another letter tucked into a box she hadn't opened before. This one dated October 5th, 2018, just days before Harold died. To my heir, it's been 2 days since I sealed the vault and created the puzzle. I'm dying. Cancer, aggressive and fast. The doctors give me weeks at most. I'm writing this in what might be my final days of clarity. I've been thinking about wealth and what it means. I built Barrington Leather from nothing, employed hundreds, created value. It all died anyway. Not because I failed, but because the world moved on. Her eyes landed on one category she'd previously overlooked: real estate deeds. Harold had purchased properties over the years, small parcels of land, buildings that he'd held as investments. The inventory listed them with addresses and estimated values. Elena read through the list carefully. Most were in Cleveland's industrial corridor, probably worthless now that the area had collapsed economically. But one entry made her pause. Commercial property, 1240 Euclid Avenue, Cleveland. Purchased, 1995. Original cost, $180,000. Current estimated value, $2,400,000. Euclid Avenue was downtown. Prime real estate. If Harold owned a building there, it could be sold quickly, converted to cash without the complications of selling gold or diamonds. Real estate transactions were normal, documented, legal. No one would question a property owner selling a building they legally held. Elena searched for the deed in the vault. Found it in a file labeled Real Estate Holdings. The property at 1240 Euclid was a 3-story building currently leased to a law firm. Annual rent of $140,000, paid directly to an account Harold had established, probably still generating income that was sitting unclaimed somewhere. This was the answer. Sell the building, use the proceeds to fund repairs while Jacob handled the more complex vault assets. Clean, simple legal. Elena called Jacob first thing in the morning. The real estate holdings in the vault, they're in Harold's name, right? Not transferred with the property deed. Let me check. Sound of papers shuffling. Actually, no. They were held in the same legal structure as the vault contents. Remember, Harold classified everything as structural improvements. That included deeds to other properties he'd purchased using factory profits. When you bought the factory, you bought those property rights too. So I could sell them. Legally. Absolutely. They're your assets now. Selling real estate is straightforward. What? Elena told him about the Euclid Avenue building. Jacob was quiet for a moment, then laughed. That's brilliant. Sell the building, get liquid capital, fund your repairs. It's clean and fully documentable. I'll handle the sale myself. Should be able to close within 60 days. 60 days. 2 months until $2.4 million landed in Elena's account legally and clearly. 2 months until she could stop living on borrowed money and cash hidden in a vault. 2 months until she could prove to Carmen and everyone else that she'd made the right choice. But 60 days also meant 2 months of vulnerability. 2 months of Carmen investigating. 2 months of living with a secret that could unravel if someone pushed too hard. Elena looked at Sophia, playing in the next room, at the home they were building in an abandoned factory, at the impossible future that was slowly becoming real. And she decided that 2 months was manageable. She'd survived 7 months in a car. She could survive 2 more months of uncertainty. Because at the end of those 2 months, everything would change. The vault contents would be documented. The wealth would be legally hers. And Elena Martinez would prove that sometimes the most desperate gambles pay off in ways no one could predict. She just had to make it through 8 more weeks without everything falling apart. How hard could that be? The call came on a Tuesday morning exactly 6 weeks after Elena had opened the vault. Jacob's voice was tight with controlled excitement, the kind of tone attorneys used when delivering news they knew would change everything. Elena, we need to meet. Today if possible. I have the full authentication reports, and there's something you need to see in person. They met at his office at noon. Elena left Sophia with Mrs. Chun, drove downtown in the Accord that now ran smoothly after proper repairs, and rode the elevator to the 10th floor with her stomach in knots. 6 weeks of living on borrowed money and hidden cash. 6 weeks of Carmen's increasing suspicion. 6 weeks of wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake trusting Jacob with the truth about the vault. Jacob's office was different this time. 3 other people waited there, professional-looking individuals with expensive briefcases and serious expressions. Jacob made introductions quickly. Elena Martinez. This is Patricia Wong, certified gemologist. David Brenner, numismatic expert specializing in rare coins and currency. And Sarah Mitchell, who handles high-value stock certificate authentication for Morgan Stanley. They shook hands. Elena sat in the chair Jacob indicated, feeling suddenly small and out of place among people whose expertise was measured in decades and whose clients probably drove cars that cost more than most houses. Jacob opened a leather portfolio on his desk. Over the past 6 weeks, these experts have examined everything in Harold Barrington's vault. Every coin, every gemstone, every stock certificate, every document. What we're about to share with you is the complete, authenticated assessment of what you own. Patricia spoke first, her voice carrying the precision of someone who measured value in microscopic details. The diamond collection consists of 42 individual stones, ranging from 1.8 carats to 5.3 carats. Every stone has been authenticated and graded. Current market value for investment-grade diamonds of this quality is approximately $4.7 million, slightly higher than Mr. Barrington's estimate due to market appreciation. She slid a document across the desk. Elena saw photographs of individual diamonds, each one labeled with technical specifications she didn't understand. Clarity grades, color ratings, cut quality. Numbers that translated to wealth beyond anything she'd imagined. David adjusted his glasses and opened his own folder. The rare coin collection is extraordinary, not just in value, but in curation. Mr. Barrington had exceptional knowledge of numismatics. He focused on key dates, mint errors, and historically significant pieces. The 1889 C.C. Morgan dollar alone is worth $68,000 in current market conditions. The complete collection, 327 individual coins, has a conservative auction estimate of $9.2 million. Another document joined the first. Pages of coin photographs, tiny details magnified, historical context explained. Elena saw prices that made her dizzy. One coin worth more than she'd earned in 3 years of nursing. Sarah's presentation was even more complex. Stock certificates are tricky because paper shares have been largely phased out. However, all of Mr. Barrington's holdings are from companies that still honor original certificates. The Microsoft shares purchased in 1986 are now worth $4.2 million after multiple stock splits. Apple, purchased in 1992, are worth $3.8 million. Amazon, purchased in 1997 at $18 per share, are now worth $6.4 million. The complete portfolio of stock certificates has a current market value of $187.3 million. Elena's hands started shaking. She clasped them together to hide it, but Patricia noticed and smiled gently. It's a lot to process. Jacob took over. The gold holdings, 450 troy ounces, are currently worth $855,000 at spot price. The silver, 8,000 ounces, is worth $208,000. The rare currency collection, which includes everything from Confederate bills to German Weimar Republic notes, has been appraised at $11.4 million. Bearer bonds from various corporations total $31.2 million in current value. He paused, let the numbers settle. And then there's the real estate. Mr. Barrington owned 17 properties beyond the factory itself. Most are in Cleveland's industrial corridor and have limited value. But 4 properties are in prime downtown locations. The building on Euclid Avenue that we're in the process of selling is the most valuable at $2.4 million. The others range from $800,000 to $1.6 million. Total real estate holdings, $8.7 million. Jacob pulled out a final document. This one is single page with numbers organized in neat columns. Total authenticated value of vault contents as of today's market conditions, $462,485,000. The number sat there on the page like something from Fever Dream. $462 million. Not the estimate from Harold's inventory, but confirmed, authenticated, certified by experts whose reputations depended on accuracy. Elena stared at the number and felt the room tilt slightly. This was real. All of it. The coins were real, the diamonds were real, the stock certificates were real, and they all belonged to her. To a woman who'd been sleeping in a car 2 months ago. To a single mother who'd spent her last $600 on an abandoned building. To someone the world had written off as just another statistic of American economic failure. Ms. Martinez? Patricia's voice was concerned. Are you all right? I think I need a minute. Jacob dismissed the experts with thanks and promises to be in touch about next steps. When they'd left, he poured Elena a glass of water from a crystal pitcher on his credenza. Drink. Breathe. This is normal shock. Elena drank, hands still trembling. It's too much. It can't be real. It's absolutely real. And it's absolutely yours. The legal documentation is airtight. When you bought that factory, you bought everything in it. Harold structured it that way deliberately. Every expert I consulted confirmed it. There's no legal challenge that could succeed. This wealth is yours, free and clear. What about taxes? When you liquidate assets, you'll pay capital gains tax on the appreciation. Roughly 20% federal, maybe another 4% state. So if you sell everything, you're looking at about $110 million in taxes. That still leaves you with over $350 million. $350 million after taxes. Elena tried to comprehend that number, to fit it into the reality of her life. She'd been rationing food 2 months ago, making 1 box of pasta stretch across 3 meals. She'd sold her professional tools, her nursing textbooks, everything of value just to keep Sophia fed. And now she owned more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. What happens next? Jacob leaned back in his chair. That's your decision. We can liquidate everything quickly, pay the taxes, set you up for life. Or we can be strategic, sell assets gradually, minimize tax burden, invest the proceeds for long-term growth. With proper management, $350 million could generate $15 to $20 million per year in investment income indefinitely. $15 million per year. Without working, without doing anything except existing. Elena thought about her nursing license that had lapsed, the job applications that went nowhere, the eviction notices and past due bills. She'd been fighting so hard just to survive, and now survival was the least of her concerns. How long until the Euclid Avenue building sells? We're closing in 2 weeks. The buyer is paying cash, waiving inspection, eager to acquire the property. You'll have $2.4 million in your account by the end of the month. $2.4 million. Would have been an impossible amount 2 months ago, now felt almost small compared to the total. Elena understood intellectually that this was more money than most people saw in a lifetime, but the context of $462 million made it seem like pocket change. And the rest? The vault contents. Once the real estate sale establishes your financial legitimacy, we can move faster on other assets. Start liquidating gold and silver through reputable dealers. Sell stock certificates through brokerage houses. Auction rare coins through specialist houses like Heritage or Stack's Bowers. Each transaction will be fully documented and taxed appropriately. Within 6 months, you could have $100 million in liquid assets. Within a year, everything could be converted and properly managed. Elena closed her eyes and tried to imagine a year from now. What would her life look like? Where would she live? What would she do with money that could buy anything, solve any problem, transform any situation? I need to tell Sophia. I'd recommend waiting until after the real estate sale closes. Once you have that first major transaction completed, the rest becomes easier to explain. Right now, it's still theoretical. In 2 weeks, it will be real money in a real account. Elena drove back to the factory in a daze. The authentication numbers kept running through her mind on repeat. $462 million. $187 million in stocks alone. $9.2 million in coins. Numbers that didn't feel connected to reality, to the life she'd lived, to the person she understood herself to be. She parked in the factory lot and sat for a moment, looking at the building that had changed everything. From the outside, it still looked like a wreck. Fire damage visible on the north end, boarded windows, faded paint. Nothing about the exterior suggested that inside was a vault containing nearly $500 million in authenticated wealth. Sophia was waiting in their apartment when Elena came up the stairs. She'd set the table for dinner, something simple from the food pantry supplies, and was doing homework by the light of the desk lamp that still felt like a luxury, even though they'd had electricity for weeks now. "How was your meeting, Mama?" Elena sat beside her daughter and pulled her close. "It was good, baby. Really good. I found out that the things Harold left us are worth a lot more than we thought." "How much more?" Elena hesitated. "How did you explain hundreds of millions to a 9-year-old? How did you prepare a child for the reality that their entire life was about to transform in ways that were impossible to predict? Enough that we'll never have to worry about money again. Enough that you can go to any college you want. Enough that we can help a lot of people who need help." Sophia considered this seriously. "Will we have to move? Leave the factory? Do you want to move?" "I don't know. I like my room here. I like that it's ours. But maybe it would be nice to live somewhere that isn't a factory." She paused. "Will we get a house?" "With a yard. If you want one, yes. We can have anything you want, Sophia." Her daughter looked at her with eyes too wise for 9 years old. "Will you be different? Will you change?" The question hit harder than the authentication numbers had. Will you change? It was the fear beneath every lottery winner's story, every inheritance tale, every rags to riches narrative. That sudden wealth corrupted, that money revealed the worst in people, that becoming rich meant losing yourself. "I'm going to try very hard not to change in the bad ways," Elena said carefully. "But some things will change because they have to. We'll have a better home, better security, better opportunities. But I'll still be your mama. You'll still be my Sophia. That won't change no matter how much money we have." Sophia hugged her tightly. "Good. Because I like you the way you are." They ate dinner together, the simple meal of rice and canned beans that Sophia had prepared, and Elena felt gratitude so profound it bordered on pain. 2 months ago, they'd been rationing food, making one can of soup stretch across 2 meals. Now they could afford anything, but Sophia had prepared this humble dinner with care and pride, and it tasted better than anything expensive could have. Carmen called that night, voice sharp with the edge that meant she discovered something. "I did some research on that building of yours. County property records show you, as owner, purchased at auction for $600. But I also found building permits issued in your name for electrical work, plumbing, heating system installation. Those permits list contractors, licensed professionals. Their work isn't cheap, Elena. Where did the money come from?" Elena had prepared for this conversation, rehearsed it with Jacob. "I told you, a loan from someone who believed in what I was trying to do. A loan, right? And this person just gave you tens of thousands of dollars out of the goodness of their heart. No collateral, no documentation, just faith in a homeless woman's ability to renovate a condemned factory. Some people are generous. Bullshit. Nobody is that generous. I've been asking around, Elena, talking to people who know about construction costs. You put at least $50,000 into that building, probably more, and you're telling me someone just loaned you that much. Why is this any of your business, Carmen? Because you're my sister. Because Sophia is my niece. Because I know you, and I know when you're lying. You found something, didn't you? In that factory. Something valuable. And you're hiding it." Elena's heart rate spiked. Carmen was guessing, fishing for reactions, but she was also dangerously close to the truth. "There's nothing to find. The building was stripped clean years ago. Then where did the money come from? Give me a name, Elena. One name of this mysterious benefactor who's funding your fantasy." "Jacob Rosenberg." The name slipped out before Elena could stop it. She'd meant to keep Jacob's involvement private, but Carmen's pressure had found the vulnerable point and exploited it. "Who's Jacob Rosenberg?" "An attorney in downtown Cleveland. He loaned me the money because he knew the previous owner and believed the building was worth saving." Silence on the line. Then Carmen's voice, calculating and cold. "An attorney who knew the previous owner. Harold Barrington, right? The guy who owned the factory for 50 years. Yes. And this attorney just decided to loan you money because he liked Harold? Elena, do you hear how insane that sounds? What aren't you telling me? Nothing. I'm telling you everything that's relevant. No, you're not. You're hiding something major, and I'm going to find out what it is. And when I do," Carmen's voice turned ugly, vindictive. When I do, and it turns out you've been lying this whole time, I'm going to make sure everyone knows. The county, social services, the IRS, everyone. If you're running some kind of scam, if you're putting Sophia at risk, there will be consequences. She hung up. Elena sat in the darkness of the office and felt the walls closing in. Carmen had Jacob's name now. She'd research him, probably call his office, demand information. Jacob wouldn't tell her anything. Attorney-client privilege protected that, but the fact that Carmen was digging this aggressively meant time was running out. 2 weeks until the Euclid Avenue building sold. 2 weeks until Elena had legitimate, documented wealth that couldn't be questioned. 2 weeks to keep Carmen from destroying everything before the money cleared. Elena called Jacob immediately. My sister knows your name. She's going to research you, possibly contact your office. Let her. I won't tell her anything. Attorney-client privilege is absolute, but she'll know something's happening. She'll dig harder. Elena, in 2 weeks, you'll have $2.4 million in your account from a legitimate real estate sale. At that point, Carmen can dig all she wants. The transaction is legal, documented, and unassailable. Just hold on for 2 more weeks. 2 weeks felt like an eternity. Carmen started her campaign the next morning. She called the building department, spoke to Robert Walsh, asked questions about the permits Elena had filed. Walsh, bound by professional ethics, told her only what was public record. That permits had been issued, inspections had passed, limited occupancy had been approved. But Carmen twisted even that into suspicion. She called Elena that afternoon. The building inspector said you've spent at least $40,000 on repairs. Licensed contractors, proper permits, everything done by the book. That's not loan money from a friend, Elena. That's serious capital. Where did it really come from? I've told you repeatedly. A loan. From an attorney who knew Harold Barrington. An attorney who specializes in estate planning. Don't you think that's convenient? Harold dies. His factory goes to auction. You buy it for nothing. And suddenly his attorney is funding your renovations? What was in that factory, Elena? What did Harold leave behind? Elena kept her voice steady. Nothing but a building that needed work. Liar. You're lying, and I know it. I'm going to prove it. Carmen escalated. She called the IRS, filed a report suggesting Elena had undeclared income. The report went nowhere. Elena hadn't liquidated any vault assets yet, so there was no income to declare, but it triggered a flag in the system that would make future transactions scrutinized more carefully. She contacted social services, claimed Elena was living in unsafe conditions with Sophia. A caseworker showed up 3 days later, apologetic but required to investigate. She toured the apartment, saw Sophia's proper bedroom, the working utilities, the stocked refrigerator, the warm space that clearly met all safety requirements. The case was closed within an hour, but the visit had made Elena's hands shake for the rest of the day. Your sister really doesn't like you, the caseworker had said on her way out. For what it's worth, you're doing a great job. Sophia is healthy, happy, and clearly well cared for. Don't let family drama make you doubt yourself. But the doubt was there anyway. Carmen was relentless, vindictive, determined to prove that Elena's success was somehow fraudulent. And the closer they got to the real estate closing, the more aggressive Carmen became. 1 week before closing, Carmen showed up at the factory with Carlos and 2 people Elena didn't recognize. She pounded on the door until Elena answered. We're here to inspect the property. You can't just show up and demand to come in. This is my home. Actually, I can. Carmen held up a document. This is from the county assessor's office. Because you've made substantial improvements to the property, they need to reassess its value for tax purposes. These are county assessors, and you're legally required to let them inspect. Elena's stomach dropped. She took the document, read it quickly. It was legitimate. The county did need to reassess after major renovations. And Carmen had somehow arranged for the inspection to happen immediately, during the most vulnerable time possible. Fine, but only the areas where repairs were made, not the entire building. The assessors were professional, efficient, thorough. They examined the second floor where Elena and Sophia lived, documented the electrical upgrades, the plumbing improvements, the heating system. They took photographs, made measurements, asked questions about contractor costs and permit values. Carmen watched everything with hawk eyes, clearly hoping they'd find something incriminating. Carlos wandered the edges of the space, examining corners, opening closets, being obviously intrusive. When they reached Harold's office, Carlos stopped at the wall where Elena had removed bricks to access the vault. The bricks had been replaced, the wall restored, but a trained eye could see the slight difference in mortar color. "What's this?" He ran his hand over the wall. "This section looks newer." One of the assessors examined it. "Probably a repair from the fire damage. Common in these old buildings to patch walls after structural work." Carlos knocked on the wall, listened to the sound. "Sounds hollow." "Carlos, enough." Carmen pulled him away. "Stop being paranoid." But the seed was planted. Carlos had noticed the wall. If he thought about it, if he researched vault construction, if he got curious enough to push, the whole thing could unravel. The assessors finished their inspection and left. Carmen lingered at the door, eyes calculating. "You got lucky today, but I know you're hiding something. And eventually, you'll slip up. Everyone always does." 5 days before closing, Jacob called with news. "The buyer wants to move up the closing date. They're willing to close tomorrow if we can arrange it. Cash deal, full price, no complications." "Why the rush?" "They're assembling adjacent properties for a larger development. Our building is the final piece. They're eager to complete the acquisition. Tomorrow, 24 hours until $2.4 million landed in Elena's account. 24 hours until she had documented proof of legitimate wealth. 24 hours until Carmen's suspicions became irrelevant. Do it. Close tomorrow." The closing took place in a conference room in Jacob's building. The buyers were a commercial development corporation represented by attorneys in suits that cost more than Elena had earned in 6 months of nursing. They barely looked at her, just signed papers and authorized transfers with the casual efficiency of people for whom millions were routine. Elena signed where Jacob indicated, her hands steady now, understanding that each signature transformed her life irrevocably. The sale was complete in 45 minutes. The buyer's attorneys left immediately, already focused on the next transaction. Jacob pulled up his laptop and showed Elena her bank account, the one he'd helped her open 3 weeks ago, which had held exactly $43 before today. The screen now showed a balance that made her breath catch. $2,387,400. $2.3 million. Real money in a real account with her real name on it. Not hidden cash, not gold in a vault, not theoretical wealth that might exist. Actual, spendable, documented money. "How does it feel?" Jacob asked. "Terrifying. Impossible. Real. It's all three. Welcome to wealth, Elena. Use it wisely." Elena drove back to the factory in a daze. She had $2.4 million. In addition to the $462 million still hidden in the vault. She was wealthy beyond any definition that had ever applied to her life. She could buy a house, multiple houses, a car, a new wardrobe, anything Sophia needed, anything she wanted. But what she felt most strongly wasn't joy or relief or excitement. It was vindication. Proof that buying the factory hadn't been a mistake. Proof that refusing Carmen's conditional help had been right. Proof that sometimes desperate gambles paid off in ways that transformed everything. Sophia was at school. Elena picked her up early, took her to the ice cream shop they'd passed 100 times, but never had money to visit. "Why are we getting ice cream on a Tuesday?" Sophia asked, confused but delighted. "Because I sold a building today. And because I love you. And because we can afford ice cream now without worrying about it." They sat in a booth with sundaes neither of them finished. Too rich, too much, too perfect. Sophia chattered about school, about her friend Jessica, who'd invited her to a birthday party, about how her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, said she was doing really well in math. Elena watched her daughter and felt emotions too complex to name. Gratitude that they'd survived. Relief that the hardest part was over. Fear about what came next. Pride that she'd fought through impossible circumstances and won. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Sophia's voice was suddenly serious. "Of course, baby. When we have money, will you still be you?" Or will you be different like on TV when people get rich and forget where they came from? Elena took her daughter's small hand across the table. I will always remember where we came from. Always. No amount of money will make me forget sleeping in the car, or how scared I was, or how brave you were. Those memories are part of us now. They made us stronger. Good. Because I like us the way we are. Just maybe with more ice cream sometimes. Elena laughed, the first real laugh she'd allowed herself in weeks. We can definitely afford more ice cream. Carmen found out about the real estate sale within hours. She called that evening, voice shaking with rage. You sold a building? You sold a $2.4 million building that you somehow owned. Yes. Property that was part of my factory purchase. Ow! How did you own a downtown building? The factory was on Industrial Parkway. The Euclid Avenue property is downtown. They're not the same thing. Elena took a breath. Jacob had coached her for this conversation. Harold Barrington owned multiple properties. When I bought the factory, I bought all assets associated with his business holdings. That included real estate he'd acquired over the years. It's all documented in the property deed. Bullshit. Complete bullshit. You didn't know about that building when you bought the factory. You found something. I know you did. You found something Harold left behind, and you've been hiding it. I found property deeds, yes, in the factory offices. That's not a crime, Carmen. That's due diligence. How much of my inheritance did you steal? The accusation landed like a slap. Your inheritance? Harold Barrington was not your relative. You have zero claim to anything he owned. He was Dad's business associate. They worked together in the 80s. That makes his estate connected to our family. You're stealing from all of us. Elena kept her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. Harold and Dad knew each other professionally. That doesn't give you or anyone in our family any legal claim to his property. I bought the factory legally at a county auction. Everything in it became mine. That's how property law works. We'll see what a judge says about that. I'm filing a claim against your assets. Fraud, concealment, whatever my attorney advises. You're not going to get away with this. Go ahead and file. My attorney will be happy to defend against frivolous claims from people with no standing. Carmen made a sound like a wounded animal. You think you've won. You think having money means you're better than me. But I know the truth, Elena. You're still the same loser who couldn't keep a job, couldn't keep an apartment, couldn't manage her own life without falling apart. Money doesn't change that. You're still a failure who got lucky. Elena hung up and sat in the silence that followed. Carmen's words hurt because they contained fragments of truth twisted into weapons. Yes, she'd lost her job. Yes, she'd been evicted. Yes, she'd failed at maintaining the life she'd built. But she hadn't failed at loving Sophia, hadn't failed at fighting, hadn't failed at surviving against odds that would have broken most people. And now she had resources to ensure she'd never fail that way again. The next morning, Elena met with Jacob to discuss next steps. Your sister filed a legal claim overnight. Preliminary injunction seeking to freeze your assets pending investigation into the ownership of Harold Barrington's estate properties. Elena's stomach dropped. Can she do that? She can file it. The court will dismiss it. She has no standing, no legal basis, no legitimate claim. But it will take a few weeks to get the dismissal. During that time, she might cause complications. What kind of complications? Harassment, mostly. More reports to authorities. More attempts to trigger investigations. She's trying to make your life difficult enough that you'll settle just to make her go away. I'm not settling. She doesn't deserve anything. Good. Because settling would validate her claims and open the door to more demands. We fight this, we win, and then we make it very clear that future harassment will result in restraining orders and potential criminal charges. But Carmen's legal filing triggered exactly what Elena had feared. Attention. The local newspaper ran a small story. Homeless woman becomes millionaire after factory purchase. The article was factually accurate but sensational in tone, painting Elena as either incredibly lucky or potentially suspicious. The story spread online. Cleveland news sites picked it up, then regional outlets. Within 3 days, Elena's phone was ringing constantly. Reporters requesting interviews, financial advisors offering services, people she'd never met claiming to be long-lost relatives who deserved a share of her wealth. Sophia's school called. The principal needed to speak with her about a delicate situation. Elena drove there immediately, heart pounding. Principal Davidson was sympathetic but firm. Mrs. Martinez, we've had several reporters attempt to contact Sophia at school. They want statements about your financial situation, about your previous homelessness, about how this windfall feels. We've blocked all contact, but I need you to know this is happening. What do I do? Consider whether Sophia might be better served by a temporary transfer to a different school, somewhere less public, while media attention settles down. We can arrange it quietly, minimize disruption to her education. Elena felt rage building. My daughter shouldn't have to change schools because people can't respect our privacy. I agree, but her safety and well-being are paramount. Other parents are talking. Some are concerned their children are being exposed to inappropriate influences. I've explained that your financial situation doesn't impact Sophia's place here, but perception matters in these situations. The unfairness of it burned. Elena had done nothing wrong. She'd bought property legally, found assets legally, and was now being punished because other people were jealous or suspicious or vindictive. I'll think about it. That evening, Elena sat with Sophia and tried to explain the situation without scaring her. Baby, people are interested in our story. How we went from living in the car to having money. Some people are being nosy about it in ways that aren't respectful. Like reporters at school. Elena's chest tightened. You knew about that? Mrs. Patterson told me not to talk to strangers asking questions. She said it was for my safety. Sophia paused. Are we in danger? No, we're not in danger. People are just curious. But I might move you to a different school temporarily. Somewhere quieter where you can focus on learning instead of dealing with adult problems. Sophia nodded slowly. Will I still see Jessica? Yes. We'll arrange playdates. This is just until things calm down. 2 days later, Sophia transferred to a private elementary school 45 minutes away. Tuition was $28,000 per year, which Elena paid in full without flinching. The school had security, required registration for all visitors, and strict policies about media access. Sophia would be safe there while the public attention eventually faded. Carmen used the school transfer in her legal filing, claiming it proved Elena was trying to hide something, that legitimate wealth didn't require moving children to private schools under cover of privacy concerns. Her attorney argued that Elena's secrecy suggested criminal activity, that the real estate sale was just the visible portion of a larger hidden fortune. They weren't wrong. Elena did have a larger hidden fortune, $462 million of it. But it was legally hers, and Carmen's baseless accusations didn't change that. Jacob filed motions to dismiss Carmen's claims. The judge scheduled a hearing for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Elena's bank account remained unfrozen. Carmen's injunction had been denied, but the legal process had created exactly the scrutiny Elena had hoped to avoid. The IRS sent a letter requesting documentation for the real estate sale. Standard procedure, Jacob assured her, but they wanted to verify the chain of ownership, confirm purchase prices, ensure proper tax reporting. Elena provided everything. Harold's original deed, the property transfer document from the factory purchase, the recent sale documentation. All of it legitimate, properly recorded, legally sound. But the scrutiny made Elena nervous, because eventually someone would ask about the vault. If they examined the factory thoroughly, if they researched Harold's full estate, if they discovered the meticulous records he'd kept of purchases and holdings, the questions would become harder to answer with casual explanations. We need to accelerate the vault liquidation, Elena told Jacob, before someone forces disclosure. I agree. Let's start with the gold. We'll sell it through multiple dealers in smaller lots. Nothing large enough to trigger reporting requirements individually, but collectively it will generate significant capital. Should be able to move all 450 ounces within 2 months. What about the rare coins? The diamonds? Auction houses. Heritage has agreed to feature select pieces in their next major auction. We'll sell the highest value items first, establish market credibility, then move the rest gradually. 6 months to liquidate everything at optimal prices. 6 months. Half a year of living with the secret while slowly converting it to documented wealth. Half a year of Carmen's legal harassment, media attention, and public scrutiny. Half a year of protecting Sophia from a world that had suddenly become very interested in their business. Elena returned to the factory that evening exhausted. She checked on Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully despite the upheaval, then went to the vault. She needed to see it to confirm it was still real, to ground herself in the physical proof of what she owned. The vault door opened smoothly. Inside, the shelves still held their carefully organized wealth. Gold coins gleaming under LED lights. Silver bars stacked like building blocks. Boxes of rare currency, diamonds, stock certificates. All of it real, valuable hers. Elena pulled out Harold's final letter and read it again. Use it wisely. Use it well. Don't hoard it the way I might have. Build something meaningful. Help people who need help. She'd been so focused on protecting the wealth, on converting it to legal assets, on fighting off Carmen's attacks, that she hadn't thought much about what she'd actually do with the money. Beyond buying a house and securing Sophia's future, beyond escaping poverty and achieving stability, what was the point of $462 million? Elena thought about St. Vincent, Delaware, Paul, where she'd gotten food pantry supplies. About the emergency room, where they'd treated Sophia despite Elena having no insurance. About Mrs. Chun, who'd watched Sophia for free when Elena desperately needed help. About every person who'd shown kindness when they didn't have to, who'd helped without expecting anything in return. She thought about all the other Elenas out there right now. Single mothers sleeping in cars. Families facing eviction. People who'd lost jobs and couldn't find new ones. Individuals who'd made the mistake of trusting relatives who stole from them. The countless people living one crisis away from complete disaster. She could help them, not just with charity, but with real support. Housing, job training, legal assistance, medical care. The kind of comprehensive help that actually transformed lives rather than just delaying disaster. Elena closed the vault and went back upstairs. She pulled out a notebook and began writing. Plans for a foundation. Programs for homeless families. Resources for single mothers. Training centers for people who'd lost careers and needed new skills. She wrote until her hand cramped, ideas flowing faster than she could capture them. This was what the money was for. Not just to save herself, but to save others. To prove that sometimes rescue was possible, that wealth could be a tool for good rather than just accumulation for its own sake. Harold had wanted someone who would build something meaningful. Elena would give him exactly that. The court hearing for Carmen's injunction took place on a Tuesday morning in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and disappointment. Carmen sat with her attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Sutton, who'd clearly taken the case on contingency, hoping for a settlement. Elena sat with Jacob, hands folded, expression calm despite the nervousness churning her stomach. Judge Margaret Reeves presided, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that suggested she'd heard every form of nonsense the legal system could produce. Sutton presented Carmen's case. He argued that Elena had discovered hidden assets belonging to Harold Barrington's estate, that those assets should have gone through probate, that Carmen, as a potential beneficiary, despite no blood relation, had standing to challenge the transfer. Jacob demolished the argument methodically. Your Honor, Harold Barrington's estate was fully settled in 2019. All assets were distributed according to his will. The property at Industrial Parkway was sold at public auction by the county after tax delinquency. Ms. Martinez purchased it legally. Everything within that property transferred to her as the new owner. That's basic property law. But she found additional assets, Sutton argued. Assets the estate didn't know about. Assets that were legally part of the property structure. Improvements made by Mr. Barrington during his ownership. The vault and its contents were not separate from the property. They were integrated into it. That makes them part of the real estate transfer. She's hiding the full extent of what she found. The real estate sale is just the beginning. We believe there are additional assets, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars, that Ms. Martinez has concealed. Judge Reeves looked at Elena directly. Ms. Martinez, are there additional assets beyond the real estate you sold? Jacob started to object, but Elena touched his arm. Your Honor, I found several things in the factory that have belonged to Harold Barrington. Some real estate deeds, some personal items, some business records. I'm working with my attorney to inventory everything properly and ensure all taxes are paid appropriately. But everything I found was physically located within the property I purchased. It's mine legally. Are we talking about significant additional wealth? Elena met the judge's eyes. Potentially yes, but it's all legally acquired through the property purchase. My sister has no claim to it. Judge Reeves turned to Carmen. Ms. Torres, what is your relationship to Harold Barrington? Carmen's attorney answered. They had a business relationship years ago. Mr. Barrington and Ms. Torres's father worked together. So no blood relation, no inheritance, no legal connection to the estate. But Your Honor, I've heard enough. Judge Reeves picked up her gavel. This claim is dismissed. Ms. Torres has no standing to challenge Ms. Martinez's ownership of property purchased at public auction. The estate was settled properly. The property transferred legally. Whether Ms. Martinez found $100 or $100 million in that factory is irrelevant to Ms. Torres's non-existent claim. The gavel came down. Carmen made a sound of protest, but the judge was already moving to the next case. Outside the courthouse, Jacob smiled for the first time in weeks. That's it. She can't challenge again without new evidence. You're clear. But Carmen wasn't done. She appeared as Elena reached her car, face flushed with rage. You're a thief. You know that? You stole from Harold's memory, from his legacy, from everyone who had a right to his wealth. No one had a right to his wealth except who he chose. And he chose me by setting up the property transfer the way he did. You think money makes you better than me? You're still the same failure you always were. Just a failure with a bank account now. Sophia was with Mrs. Chun. Elena could afford to say what needed saying. You want to know the difference between us, Carmen? When you stole $8,000 from me, when you kicked me out while I was homeless, when you called social services trying to take Sophia away, you were trying to hurt me. Everything you've done has been about tearing me down. Elena stepped closer. But when I use this wealth, when I build something with it, I'm going to help people. Real people who need real help. I'm going to be what you never were. Someone who lifts others up instead of pushing them down. That's the difference money makes. She got in the car and drove away, leaving Carmen standing in the parking lot with her rage and her failed legal claim and the realization that all her vindictiveness had accomplished nothing except proving exactly who she was. That evening, Elena stood in the vault and made decisions. She'd been reacting for 2 months to threats, to attacks, to challenges. Now it was time to act. She called Jacob. Start liquidating everything. I want to move fast, get everything converted within 3 months instead of 6. And once we have liquid capital, I want to set up a foundation. Full legal structure, board of directors, mission statement. I'm ready to build something that matters. What kind of foundation? One that helps single mothers like I was helped. That provides housing, job training, legal support, medical care. That gives people real second chances instead of temporary band-aids. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Harold would be proud. The next morning, Elena drove to St. Vincent, Delaware Paul, with Sophia beside her. They walked into the food pantry where Elena had stood 2 months ago, desperate and ashamed, taking free groceries because it was that or let her daughter go hungry. She found the same elderly volunteer who'd helped her. Ms. Martinez. The woman recognized her. How are you? I've seen you in the news. Elena pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Inside was a check for $50,000 for the pantry to help other families like you helped us. The volunteer's eyes filled with tears. This is too much. It's not nearly enough, but it's a start. Elena took Sophia's hand. Thank you for treating me with dignity when I had nothing. I won't forget that. As they left, Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. That was a nice thing to do. We're going to do a lot of nice things, baby, because we can afford to now, and because it's the right thing to do. Elena drove back to the factory, their home, their foundation, the place where everything had changed. The building looked different now, with proper lighting installed, windows replaced, the fire damage being systematically repaired. Still not beautiful, but functional. Safe. Theirs. Inside the vault, $462 million waited to be transformed into something meaningful. Outside, a future waited to be built. And Elena Martinez, who'd been homeless 3 months ago, who'd bought an abandoned factory with her last $600, who discovered wealth beyond imagining hidden behind a false wall, was finally ready to stop just surviving and start living. The revelation was complete. The authentication was finished. The legal challenges were defeated. Now came the hard part, figuring out who she wanted to become. 3 years passed. The Martinez Foundation for Family Stability opened in a renovated section of the leather factory. Elena had transformed the main manufacturing floor into a comprehensive support center. Housing assistance, job training, legal aid, childcare, medical clinic. Everything she needed when she'd had nothing, now available to others fighting the same battles. The vault contents liquidated gradually, exactly as Jacob had planned. Final total after taxes, $347 million in documented, legal wealth managed by professional advisors. Elena drew a modest salary as foundation director. The rest funded programs that had helped 2,847 families in 3 years. Real numbers. Real lives changed. Sophia thrived at her private school, made genuine friends, brought them home to the factory-turned residence on the 3rd floor where Elena had created a proper apartment overlooking the city. Not mansion living, Elena had consciously chosen to stay grounded, but comfortable, safe, permanent. Carmen tried twice more to challenge the inheritance through different legal theories. Both attempts dismissed with prejudice. The final hearing ended with the judge warning that further frivolous filings would result in sanctions. Carmen left the courthouse in silence and never contacted Elena again. The media attention faded after 6 months. Elena gave one interview to Cleveland magazine, told her story honestly, then declined all other requests. She wanted to do the work, not be famous for doing the work. On the 4th anniversary of buying the factory, Elena stood in Harold's office, now her office, and opened the journal one final time. She'd added her own entry on the last page. Harold, you left wealth for someone who'd care enough to find it. You got Elena Martinez, homeless single mother, last $600 to her name. I hope that's what you wanted. I've tried to honor your wishes. Build something meaningful. Help people who need help. Prove that broken things can be fixed, that desperate gambles sometimes pay off, that second chances are real. Sophia just turned 12. Straight A student, wants to be a doctor. She remembers the car, the parking lots, the fear. But she also remembers that we survived, that we fought, that we won. Your factory isn't dead. It's transformed. Where leather was once manufactured, hope is now created. Different product, same purpose, giving people the tools to build better lives. Thank you for seeing potential in a destroyed building. Thank you for betting on desperation and bravery. Thank you for proving that sometimes the universe rewards those who refuse to quit. The vault is empty now, but what it built will last. With gratitude, Elena Martinez. She closed the journal and placed it in the Foundation's archive, where future families could read about the impossible becoming real. Sophia called from downstairs. Mama, Mrs. Chun brought dinner. Elena smiled. Some things didn't change with money. Mrs. Chun still visited weekly, still brought food, still treated them like family. The important things, love, loyalty, kindness, those remained constant regardless of bank account balances. She descended the stairs to her daughter, her home, her life built from $600 in desperation and a dead man's carefully planned generosity. Carmen was wrong. Money hadn't changed who Elena was. It had revealed who she'd always been underneath the struggle, someone who lifted others up instead of pushing them down. And that made all the difference. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.